Hi guys! Tonight we explore one of the quiet mysteries of world history. A question that seems simple at first yet stretches across thousands of years of human time. How did Persia become Iran? You begin in darkness, not the darkness of night, but the darkness of deep time. A time so distant that even the earliest written records of human civilization have not yet appeared. Slowly the land around you becomes visible. You stand on a vast plateau surrounded by distant mountain ranges. To the north rise the rugged slopes of the Caucasus and the windswept lands near the Caspian Sea. To the west stretch the ancient river valleys of Mesopotamia. To the east, deserts fade into Central Asia. And to the south, beyond dry plains and rocky hills, lies the warm blue water of the Persian Gulf. Long before the name Iran existed, and long before the word Persia appeared in Greek writings, people already lived here. Small groups move across the landscape. You can see their fires glowing faintly in the cool evening air. Their shelters are simple. Their tools are made of stone, bone and wood. Archaeologists today have discovered that humans have lived on this plateau for tens of thousands of years. Caves such as those found in the Zagros Mountains show evidence of ancient communities who hunted wild goats gathered in plants and slowly learned how to adapt to the harsh but beautiful environment of this region. The air is dry, the wind carries the smell of dust and distant grasses. In the quiet distance, herds of animals move slowly across the plains. This land will one day become the heart of one of the most influential civilizations in human history. But for now, it is simply a place where people survive one day at a time. Historians often describe the birth of civilization as something that happened suddenly in famous places like ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt. Yet the Iranian plateau played a quiet role in this early human story. Some of the earliest agricultural communities in the region appear around 10,000 years ago. You can imagine small villages forming near rivers and fertile valleys. People begin to grow wheat and barley. They keep goats and sheep. Clay pottery appears decorated with simple patterns that archaeologists still study today. One unusual discovery from ancient sites such as Tepsi Alk shows that some of the earliest people in this region may have been experimenting with wine production nearly 7,000 years ago. Clay jars found buried in the earth contain chemical traces of fermented grapes. In the evenings, you can imagine families gathering near small fires, drinking a primitive version of wine as stories pass from one generation to the next. It is a small detail, but it reminds you that even in the distant past, humans searched for comfort, ritual, and shared experience. Scholars remain divided about how early cultures across the Iranian plateau connected with the civilizations growing nearby in Mesopotamia. Some researchers believe trade routes already linked these regions thousands of years before written history began. Others think the development happened more independently, but slowly something important begins to take shape. A cultural identity begins forming among the people of this vast plateau. Languages evolve. Traditions pass from tribe to tribe. Over many centuries, groups speaking early Indo-Iranian languages begin migrating into the region from Central Asia. These migrations are still debated among historians. Archaeologists continue discussing whether these early Indo-Iranian groups arrived suddenly through large movements of people or whether the process happened gradually through slow cultural blending over generations. But the linguistic evidence suggests that somewhere in the distant past new peoples arrived, carrying languages that would later evolve into Persian. The word that eventually becomes Iran comes from an ancient root connected to the word Aryan. In its original sense, it simply meant the land of the Aryans, referring to Indo-Iranian peoples who lived across this region. In the far future, the name will take on political meanings and misunderstandings that its earliest users never imagined. But standing here now, thousands of years in the past, none of that exists yet. You walk across the dusty ground as evening slowly approaches. A warm sunset spreads across the plateau. The sky becomes deep orange, then slowly purple. In the distance, a small settlement comes into view. Mud brick homes form a loose cluster near a narrow stream. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children run between houses. Goats wander through the village paths. Life here is simple, but it is not primitive in the way modern people sometimes imagine. These early communities understand their land deeply. They know where water flows after rare rains. They know which mountain valleys remain cool during the hottest months. They know how to survive in a landscape that can be both generous and unforgiving. Over centuries, not a knowledge like this spreads across the plateau. Trade begins to grow slowly. Obsidian stone tools move from distant mountains into villages hundreds of kilometers away. Decorative objects appear. Early forms of long-distance exchange begin shaping the economy of the region. You realize something important. The story of Persia does not begin with kings or empires. It begins with landscapes, migrations, and the quiet development of culture over thousands of years. Much later, Greek writers will call this region Persia after a powerful tribe known as the Persians who lived in the southwest. But the people living here would not have called their land Persia. To them, it was simply their homeland. Earlier, when you first stood on this plateau, the world felt empty and ancient. Yet now, as night approaches, the land feels alive with the quiet presence of human history. In the distance, drums echo faintly from a village celebration. The stars begin appearing above the mountains. And somewhere in the centuries ahead, tribes will unite. Kings will rise. Empires will form. And the world will come to know this land by a name that echoes across history. Parthia. But that story has not begun yet. For now, you simply stand beneath the vast sky of the Iranian plateau, watching the earliest roots of a civilization slowly take shape. The wind grows cooler. The fires burn softly, and history begins its long journey. Morning arrives slowly across the wide plateau. You wake to the soft glow of sunlight touching the mountains in the distance. The air is cool and still. A thin layer of dust covers the narrow paths between the mud brick homes of the village you saw the night before. Life begins early here. You watch as people step outside their homes carrying baskets and tools. Goats are led out toward the open land. Women grind grain on flat stones. Smoke rises again from small cooking fires as the first meals of the day are prepared. For thousands of years, scenes like this unfold across the Iranian plateau. Small communities grow. Villages appear near rivers, valleys, and fertile basins scattered between mountains and deserts. Slowly, agriculture becomes more stable. Wheat and barley fields spread across patches of green land surrounded by dry earth. What you are witnessing is one of the quiet foundations of civilization. By around 5000 BCE, archaeological sites across western Iran reveal growing settlements where people are not simply surviving anymore. They are organizing society in more complex ways. Pottery becomes more detailed. Tools become specialized. Trade networks grow wider. One of the most fascinating early cities appears in the southwest of the plateau near the plains of ancient Elam. The city is called Susa. Susa will eventually become one of the most important cities in the history of Persia. But right now, it is still young, only beginning to grow into a center of administration and culture. You walk through its early streets. The buildings are still made mostly of mud brick, yet the scale of construction already feels different from the small villages scattered across the plateau. Workshops exist where craftsmen shape pottery, carve stone, and produce tools for surrounding communities. Clay tablets begin appearing. Some of these early tablets contain markings that represent early accounting systems. People are tracking grain storage, livestock, and trade goods. Historians consider this an important turning point. The moment when societies begin recording information marks a major shift in human organization. Yet there is still much uncertainty about how these early systems developed in this region. Some researchers believe the people of Susa borrowed administrative ideas from nearby Mesopotamian civilizations such as the Sumerians. Others argue that similar systems developed independently across several early cultures at the same time. Archaeologists continue discussing how closely connected these early societies truly were. But one thing is clear. The Iranian plateau is no longer a quiet collection of isolated villages. It's becoming part of a larger world. Caravans move across the landscape carrying goods between distant regions. Copper from the mountains travels toward the fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia. Precious stones move east toward Central Asia. You walk along one of these early trade paths. The ground beneath your feet is hard and sun-baked. The wind carries the scent of dry grass and distant earth. A small caravan approaches slowly. Donkeys carry baskets filled with raw materials. Traders speak languages that sound unfamiliar but share certain similarities. Cultural exchange happens naturally along these routes. Ideas, tools, stories, and beliefs travel with the merchants. These quiet exchanges will slowly shape the identity of the people living on this plateau. But something even more important begins unfolding in the centuries ahead. New groups of people arrive. They come from the vast grasslands of Central Asia. These migrants speak early Indo-Iranian languages, part of a larger family of languages that will eventually spread across much of Eurasia. Their arrival marks the beginning of a cultural transformation that historians still study carefully today. You watch as these new groups settle among existing communities. At first, the changes are subtle. Different burial traditions appear, new styles of pottery emerge, words begin mixing between languages. Over generations, these cultures blend together. Eventually, among these Indo-Iranian peoples, several tribes become especially influential. One of them calls themselves the Pasua. Later, the Greeks will pronounce their names slightly differently. Persis. From this word comes the name that will echo across history. Persia. It's a small linguistic shift that will carry enormous historical weight. Yet for the people living here now, identity is still based mostly on tribe, region, and family. There is no single united state yet. No great empire. Just a growing patchwork of communities across mountains, deserts, and fertile valleys. But the conditions for something larger are slowly forming. The geography of this land encourages both independence and cooperation. Mountain ranges create natural barriers that separate tribes. At the same time, the need for trade and shared defense encourages alliances. You can feel the tension between these forces. Tribal leaders are meet to discuss agreements. Small conflicts occur over water, pasture, and territory. At night, stories pass between generations about ancestors, heroes, and the origins of their people. These oral traditions will become an important part of Persian identity. One day they will be written down in epic poems like the Shahnameh, preserving ancient legends of kings and warriors who lived long before written history. Yet historians remain uncertain how much of these legendary stories reflect real historical events. Some scholars believe the earliest Persian myths contain fragments of genuine tribal histories. Others think the stories are mostly symbolic, reflecting cultural values rather than literal history. But standing here now, you realize something interesting. Even if the legends are not entirely factual, they reveal how these people saw themselves. Brave, independent, connected to a heroic past. As the day continues, you walk toward the edge of a wide valley. The sun is high overhead now, casting bright light across fields and hills. Farmers work carefully in the soil. Traders prepare for another journey across long distances. Children run along the paths between houses. Life continues quietly. Yet beneath this peaceful surface, history is preparing a dramatic shift. Because somewhere among these tribes, new leaders are beginning to appear, leaders who will do something that has never been done before on this plateau. They will unite the tribes. They will create a kingdom. And eventually they will build one of the most powerful empires the ancient world has ever seen. For now, though, the plateau remains calm. The wind moves gently across the land. The villages continue their daily rhythm, and the first distant echoes of Persian power are only just beginning to form. The sun is low when you first hear his name, Cyrus. It drifts through the air in quiet conversations among traders and travelers moving across the plateau. At first, the name does not seem extraordinary. Tribal leaders rise and fall often in these lands, alliances change. Rivalries appear and disappear like shifting winds, yet slowly the stories about this man begin to spread farther than most. You walk through a small settlement where merchants gather near a well. Their camels rest nearby, chewing patiently as goods are unloaded from woven packs. One trader speaks about a young leader from the Persian tribe. Another nods quietly. They say he has united several clans that once fought each other. They say he defeated powerful enemies with surprising speed. They say something about him feels different. You listen carefully. In the middle of the 6th century BCE, the Iranian plateau is not empty of powerful rulers. In fact, the region is already dominated by another kingdom known as the Medes. The Median Empire controls large areas of western Iran. Their kings rule from strong cities and command large armies. For generations, the Persians themselves have lived under Median authority. But the balance of power is about to shift. You begin traveling southwest toward the lands where the Persian tribe lives. The landscape changes slowly as you move through valleys and rolling hills. The air grows warmer. The terrain becomes slightly greener compared to the harsher northern plateau. Eventually you arrive in the region known in ancient times as Persis. This is the homeland of the Persian people. Here, among modest settlements and fortified towns, Cyrus begins his rise. Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great, is born around 600 BCE. His father is a Persian noble named Cambyses. His mother, according to many ancient accounts, may have been connected to the Median royal family, yet the exact details of Cyrus's early life remain uncertain. Ancient historians such as Herodotus tell dramatic stories about his childhood. One famous legend claims that the Median king once feared a prophecy that Cyrus would overthrow him. In the story, the king orders the baby Cyrus to be killed, but the child secretly survives and grows up among shepherds. It is a fascinating tale, but many modern historians suspect these stories were shaped by later myth-making rather than strict historical fact. Scholars continue debating how much of Cyrus's childhood narrative is legend, and how much reflects real events. What matters more is what happens next. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus leads a rebellion against the Median king. You can imagine the tension of that moment. At that moment, Persian warriors gather beneath banners that flutter in the dry wind. Tribal leaders stand beside Cyrus, uncertain whether their gamble will succeed. The Median army is powerful, yet Cyrus moves quickly. Battles unfold across the rugged terrain of western Iran. In a surprising series of victories, Cyrus defeats the Median forces and captures their capital. The Median Empire collapses, and suddenly the Persians are no longer subjects. They are rulers. You stand outside the city of Ecbatana, once the center of Median power. Now Persian soldiers move through its gates while citizens watch quietly from the streets. But something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying the Median system, Cyrus preserves much of it. He allows many Median officials to remain in positions of authority. He respects local traditions and customs. Rather than ruling through fear alone, he chooses a strategy that historians still admire today. He builds cooperation. This decision becomes one of the most important features of his rule. Soon after conquering the Medes, Cyrus expands his ambitions far beyond the Iranian plateau. To the west lies the wealthy kingdom of Lydia in Anatolia. To the south lies the ancient world of Mesopotamia, including the powerful city of Babylon. You travel with a caravan heading toward Babylon. The road stretches across dry plains where ancient irrigation canals bring life to the soil. Babylon is one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Its walls are enormous. Its temples tower above the streets. Its markets are filled with merchants from many lands. In 539 BCE, Cyrus approaches this magnificent city with his army. Many people expect a brutal siege, but something remarkable happens. According to historical records found on a clay artifact known today as the Cyrus cylinder, the city falls with relatively little destruction. Babylon's population accepts Cyrus as their new ruler. Inside the city, you can see priests performing rituals inside ancient temples. Local officials continue managing daily life. Trade continues almost uninterrupted. Cyrus presents himself not as a conqueror who destroys cultures, but as a king who protects them. One of the most famous decisions attributed to Cyrus involves allowing displaced peoples to return to their homelands. Among these groups are Jewish communities who had been taken into captivity by earlier Babylonian rulers. Cyrus permits them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. This act will later earn him praise in Jewish historical texts, where he is sometimes described as a divinely chosen ruler. Historians generally agree that Cyrus practiced a relatively tolerant approach to governance compared to many ancient conquerors. However, scholars still debate whether this tolerance came primarily from moral principles or from practical political strategy. Some researchers argue that Cyrus understood that respecting local traditions made it easier to maintain control over vast territories. Whatever his motivations, the result is extraordinary. Within a few decades, Cyrus builds an empire stretching from Central Asia to the Mediterranean Sea. It becomes the largest empire the world has yet seen. You walk through one of the royal roads connecting distant regions of this empire. Couriers ride fast horses carrying out messages between cities hundreds of kilometers apart. Merchants travel safely under imperial protection. Local governors manage provinces while remaining loyal to the Persian king. For the first time in history, an enormous territory containing dozens of cultures is governed under a single imperial system, and it all began with a leader whose name once drifted quietly through trader conversations across the plateau. Cyrus! As evening falls again over the Persian homeland, you look across the land that gave birth to this empire. The stars appear one by one above the mountains. The wind moves gently across the hills, and the story of Persia has truly begun. Morning light spreads across one of the greatest cities the ancient world has ever seen. You stand outside a vast ceremonial gateway where towering stone walls glow softly under the rising sun. Relief carvings stretch across the surface of the stone. Figures walk in orderly lines, each wearing different clothing, each carrying gifts. Some bring woven textiles, some carry bowls of gold, others lead animals or hold carved vessels. You quickly realize something remarkable. None of them look exactly the same. Some wear tall headdresses, others have braided hair, some wear long robes, others shorter tunics. Their faces, their clothing, and even the objects they carry reveal something important. This empire contains many different peoples. You are standing inside the Persian world that grew after the conquests of Cyrus the Great. But Cyrus himself will not rule forever. Around 530 BCE, he dies of poison during a military campaign somewhere in Central Asia. The details of his death remain uncertain. Ancient Greek writers describe a dramatic battle against nomadic tribes, while other sources present quieter possibilities. Historians still debate what truly happened in those final days. What is certain is that the empire he created did not collapse after his death. Instead, it continues to expand and organize itself in ways the world has never seen before. Cyrus is succeeded by his son Cambyses II. Cambyses pushes Persian power even farther by conquering Egypt around 525 BCE. You can imagine Persian soldiers marching through the deserts of the Near East, eventually reaching the fertile Nile Valley. For the first time in history, Egypt becomes part of a massive empire stretching thousands of kilometers. But Cambyses' reign is short and troubled. After several years, confusion spreads across the empire following his sudden death. While returning from Egypt, a mysterious figure briefly claims the throne. Then another man rises to power. His name is Darius. You travel east toward the heart of the empire to see how this new ruler reshapes the Persian world. Darius I becomes one of the most important administrators in ancient history. When he takes control around 522 BCE, the empire is already enormous, but it still lacks a fully organized system of governance. Darius changes that. Under his rule, the empire becomes a carefully structured political machine. You walk through the imperial capital of Persepolis, which Darius begins building as a ceremonial center of Persian power. Massive stone terraces rise from the ground. Columns stretch high into the air. Staircases are carved with scenes showing representatives from across the empire bringing tribute. Every image tells the same quiet message. This empire is made of many nations. Instead of forcing all peoples to become Persian, Darius allows different cultures to maintain their traditions while remaining loyal to the empire. He divides the vast territory into provinces called satrapies. Each satrapy is governed by a local official known as a satrap. These governors collect taxes, maintain order, and report directly to the king. But Darius also understands something about human nature. Power can corrupt, so he creates another system to keep watch over the satraps. Royal inspectors travel throughout the empire without warning. These officials are sometimes described in ancient texts as the eyes and ears of the king. Their job is to make sure governors remain loyal and honest. It is an early form of administrative oversight that helps keep such a large empire functioning. You walk along one of the most famous achievements of Darius's reign, the Royal Road. Stretching roughly 2,700 kilometers from the city of Sardis in Anatolia to the imperial centers in Persia, this road becomes one of the most advanced communication networks of the ancient world. Mounted couriers ride from station to station carrying messages across the empire. Herodotus later writes that nothing stops these couriers. Not snow, not rain, not darkness of night. The statement is poetic, but it reflects the efficiency of the Persian system. Messages that once took months to travel can now move across vast distances in days. Trade grows quickly along these roads. You see caravans carrying spices from India, metals from Central Asia, grain from Mesopotamia, and luxury goods from Egypt. Markets across the empire become vibrant meeting points for cultures that once had little contact with each other. One unusual but important reform introduced under Darius is the creation of a standardized gold coin known as the daric. For the first time, a consistent imperial currency helps facilitate trade across thousands of kilometers. Merchants trust its weight and purity. Economies begin connecting more deeply than ever before. Yet despite the stability and organization of the Persian Empire, historians continue debating how centralized the system truly was. Some scholars argue that the empire functioned more like a loose federation of semi-autonomous regions rather than a tightly controlled state. Others believe the Persian king maintained stronger authority through military power and political influence. The truth may lie somewhere between these interpretations, but from your vantage point inside Persepolis, the empire feels immense and orderly. Delegations from distant lands arrive during ceremonial gatherings. You watch representatives from Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, and Central Asia climb the grand staircases carrying tribute for the king. The atmosphere is calm and dignified. Unlike many ancient empires built on constant terror, the Persian system often emphasizes cooperation between cultures. Of course, power still exists. Armies remain ready. Rebellions are sometimes crushed. But the empire survives largely because it allows diversity to exist within a unified structure. As evening approaches, torches begin lighting the courtyards of Persepolis. The stone reliefs glow softly in the fading light. You realize that this empire has created something new in human history, a political system large enough to connect continents, a network of cultures stretching from the Mediterranean Sea to the mountains of Central Asia. And at its center stands the Persian king ruling over a world of many peoples. The wind moves gently across the high terraces. The empire is strong, Zoroastrianism is strong. But beyond the western horizon, another civilization is beginning to grow restless. A world of small city-states called Greece. Soon the calm balance of this vast empire will face one of its greatest challenges. The air carries the faint scent of burning wood and warm stone. You follow a narrow path, climbing gently into the hills beyond a Persian settlement. The sky above is pale blue, the kind of calm morning that seems untouched by the turbulence of empires and wars. Ahead of you stands a quiet structure. It is not a palace, not a fortress. It is a temple, but unlike the towering temples that you may imagine from Mesopotamia or Egypt, this one feels simple. The walls are modest, the design is open to the sky, at the center burns a carefully tended flame. The fire glows steadily. Priests in long white robes move slowly around it, adding small pieces of dry wood. They treat the flame with deep reverence. You are witnessing one of the central traditions of ancient Persian religion. This is a fire temple connected to a belief system known today as Zoroastrianism. To understand Persia, you realize you must understand the spiritual ideas that shaped its people. Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest known monotheistic religions in the world. Its origins reach far back into the ancient Iranian world, though the exact dates remain uncertain. Many historians place the life of the prophet Zarathustra, known in Greek as Zoroaster, somewhere between 1500 BCE and 1000 BCE. Yet other scholars suggest he may have lived later. Archaeologists and linguists continue debating when exactly this religious transformation began, but the teachings themselves are powerful. According to tradition, Zarathustra experienced a series of divine revelations. He taught that the universe is shaped by a cosmic struggle between truth and falsehood, light and darkness. At the center of this belief stands a single supreme deity, Ahura Mazda. The name means wise lord. Ahura Mazda represents wisdom, justice, and truth. Followers believe that human beings have an important role in supporting the forces of good through their choices and actions. As you watch the priest tending the sacred fire, you notice how carefully everything is performed. Cleanliness matters deeply in this tradition. Water, earth, fire, and air are considered sacred elements that must remain pure. Rituals are designed to avoid polluting these natural forces. Fire in particular becomes a powerful symbol, not because the flame itself is worshipped, but because it represents divine light and truth. The steady glow of fire reminds believers of the presence of Ahura Mazda and the importance of moral clarity. You step closer to the temple courtyard. A small group of worshippers has gathered. Their prayers are soft, almost like whispers carried by the morning breeze. Some hold small bundles of fragrant herbs that release gentle smoke when placed near the flame. Others recite verses from ancient hymns known as the Gathas, which tradition attributes directly to Zarathustra himself. These hymns are composed in an early Iranian language that scholars today still study carefully. Linguists believe the language of the Gathas is closely related to ancient Sanskrit used in early Indian religious texts. This connection provides important clues about the shared cultural roots of Indo-Iranian peoples thousands of years ago. It is a small detail, but it reveals how deeply connected early cultures across Eurasia once were. As the ritual continues, you begin to understand how religion helped shape Persian society. Unlike some ancient belief systems focused mainly on rituals or sacrifices, Zoroastrianism places strong emphasis on ethical behavior. The core teaching can be summarized in 3 simple ideas: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. These principles guide everyday life as much as spiritual practice. Farmers believe caring for the land supports the forces of good. Merchants value honesty in trade. Leaders are expected to rule with justice and wisdom. Of course, reality is never perfect. Human societies often fall short of their ideals. Historians still debate how closely ancient Persian rulers actually followed the ethical principles of Zoroastrian teachings. Some researchers believe kings like Darius sincerely supported these religious values. Others argue that religion also served political purposes, reinforcing loyalty to the empire. But the influence of these beliefs is undeniable. You can see it in inscription carved into stone monuments across the Persian Empire. At places like Behistun, Darius proudly declares that Ahura Mazda granted him the right to rule. In these inscriptions, the king repeatedly emphasizes truth over lies. Rebellion in the Persian view is often described as the work of deceitful forces opposing divine order. It is a fascinating way to frame political authority. Religion becomes intertwined with the legitimacy of the state. Yet Zoroastrianism also contains ideas that will echo through later world religions. The concept of a final judgment, the belief in heaven and hell, the expectation of a future savior figure who will restore cosmic order. Some scholars believe these ideas may have influenced later traditions in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, though historians remain cautious about drawing direct lines of influence. Cultural exchange across ancient civilizations was complex and gradual. As the sun climbs higher, the fire in the temple continues burning steadily. You sit quietly on a stone ledge near the courtyard. A gentle wind moves through the hills. Beyond the temple fields stretch toward distant mountains where farmers work beneath the bright sky. Life continues peacefully here. Yet even within this calm spiritual world, you can sense how deeply these beliefs shape Persian identity. Religion provides more than rituals. It provides a vision of the universe, a belief that the world contains both chaos and order, and that human choices matter in the struggle between them. As afternoon light softens the hills, the priests carefully add another piece of wood to the sacred flame. The fire glows brighter for a moment, a symbol of truth, a symbol of light, and a quiet reminder that the spiritual foundations of Persia are just as important as the armies and empires that will rise above them. The morning sun rises slowly over the wide plains of the Persian heartland. You stand on a high terrace overlooking one of the most impressive construction projects of the ancient world. Workers move carefully across enormous stone platforms. Teams of craftsmen carve detailed patterns into limestone blocks. Others guide massive columns into position using ropes and wooden scaffolding. This place is Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire. It is not the administrative centre of government nor the everyday residence of the king. Instead, Persepolis is something more symbolic. It is a monumental stage where the greatness of Persia can be displayed to the world. And under the rule of Darius the Great, the empire is reaching its most organised and powerful form. From where you stand, you can see the grand staircase slowly filling with representatives arriving from distant lands. Their clothing reveals their origins. Some wear long robes from Babylon, others wear patterned garments from Central Asia. Delegations from Egypt bring carved vessels and precious metals. Each group climbs the steps calmly carrying gifts meant for the king. These scenes are not imagined. They are carved into the stone reliefs that still exist today at Persepolis. The carvings show dozens of different peoples bringing tribute peacefully to the Persian ruler. It's one of the most striking artistic representations of imperial diversity in ancient history. You walk through a wide gateway guarded by towering stone figures. Inside the complex stands the Apadana. This enormous audience hall is supported by tall columns rising high into the sky. The roof once stretched across a vast open space where the king could receive visitors from across the empire. During major ceremonies such as Nowruz, the Persian New Year, representatives from many provinces would gather here to present tribute and renew their loyalty. The atmosphere must have been ordinary. You imagine the sound of footsteps echoing across the stone floors. Silk garments rustling softly as delegations approached. Translators quietly relaying words between languages spoken from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley. The Persian Empire now stretches across 3 continents. To the west, its borders touch the Aegean Sea. To the east, Persian authority reaches deep into Central Asia and the Indus region. To the south, Egypt remains firmly under Persian control. It is the largest empire the world has yet known. But maintaining such vast territory requires more than impressive architecture. You travel beyond Persepolis along the royal road once again. Mounted couriers ride swiftly between relay stations spaced carefully along the route. Each station contains fresh horses, food supplies, and shelter for imperial messengers. This communication network allows the Persian king to send orders across thousands of kilometers. Herodotus famously admired this system. He wrote that the couriers travel with incredible speed regardless of weather or darkness. Although ancient historians sometimes exaggerate, modern scholars agree that the Persian postal network was remarkably efficient for its time. It helps hold the empire together. Meanwhile, administrators in each province collect taxes that support the royal treasury. You visit one such satrapy near the fertile lands of Mesopotamia. The satrap governs from a fortified residence surrounded by gardens and offices where scribes record shipments of grain, livestock, and metals. Taxation is carefully organized so that each province contributes according to its resources. They produce grain and gold ore. Babylon contributes agricultural wealth and craftsmanship. Regions in Central Asia supply horses and precious stones. This structured system allows the empire to maintain a large standing army as well. Persian military forces include soldiers from many different cultures within the empire. Some carry bows and arrows, others fight with spears or ride swift horses across open terrain. One elite group stands out above the rest. They are known as the Immortals. This unit of 10,000 soldiers serves as the king's personal guard. The name Immortals comes from the fact that whenever one soldier dies or becomes unable to fight another, immediately replaces him. The number of warriors always remains exactly 10,000. Ancient Greek observers found this system fascinating, yet historians today still debate how accurate these Greek descriptions truly are. Some scholars believe the term immortals may reflect misunderstandings or exaggerations from foreign writers describing Persian military organization. Even so, there is little doubt that Persian armies were disciplined and effective. But power on this scale always attracts challenges. In the western part of the empire, tensions begin rising among the Greek city-states along the coast of Anatolia. These Greek communities once enjoyed relative independence. Under Persian rule, however, local leaders must answer to Persian authority. Around 499 BCE, several of these cities rebel. The revolt spreads quickly. You stand on the rocky coastline of the Aegean Sea, watching Greek ships gather in the harbour of Miletus. Rebel leaders speak passionately about freedom from Persian control. The uprising becomes known as the Ionian Revolt. At first, Persian forces struggled to suppress the rebellion. Greek allies from the mainland even send ships to assist the rebels. but eventually Persian armies restore control over the region. The rebellion is crushed, yet the conflict leaves something behind: resentment, distrust. Both Persia and the Greek city-states begin preparing for larger confrontations. Standing at the western edge of the empire, you can sense that the balance of power is shifting. The Persian Empire remains enormous and wealthy. Its roads stretch across continents. Its cities flourish. Its administration functions with remarkable sophistication. But far beyond these calm imperial systems, small Greek city-states are quietly preparing to challenge the greatest empire the ancient world has ever seen. The winds from the Aegean grow stronger as evening approaches. Ships rock gently in the harbour, and history moves one step closer to a series of wars that will echo through centuries of storytelling. A cool wind moves across the open water of the Aegean Sea. You stand on a rocky shoreline watching waves roll gently towards land. Fishing boats drift slowly in the distance. Small coastal towns cling to the hills above the harbour, their white walls glowing under the Mediterranean sun. At first glance, this world feels very different from the vast landscapes of Persia. The Greek world is smaller. Instead of a single great empire, it is divided into many independent city-states. Each city governs itself. Each has its own tradition, leaders, and rivalries. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes. These cities often compete with one another. Yet now they share a growing concern: the expanding power of Persia. For decades, the Persian Empire has ruled the Greek-speaking cities along the western coast of Anatolia. These cities once belonged to the Greek cultural world, but now fall under Persian authority. Earlier you watched the Ionian revolt shake Persian control in this region. Although Persia eventually crushed the rebellion, the event left a lasting impression on the Persian king, Darius. He does not forget that several mainland Greek cities supported the rebels, and so he decides to respond. You walk along the docks of Athens, where rumours spread among sailors and merchants. Word has arrived that the Persian Empire is preparing an expedition across the sea. The idea seems almost impossible. The Persian Empire is vast, but is mostly a land power. Greece lies across open water, protected by rugged terrain and fiercely independent warriors. Yet the Persian king believes the Greeks must be punished for their interference. In 490 BCE, Persian forces cross the Aegean. You stand on a wide coastal plain northeast of Athens. The place is called Marathon. The Persian army has landed here, supported by ships anchored just offshore. Thousands of soldiers gather across the open field. Archers prepare their bows. Infantry form ranks beneath colourful banners. Across the plain, a much smaller force of Athenian warriors stands ready. The tension in the air is almost silent. Historians still debate the exact numbers involved in this battle. Ancient Greek sources claim the Persian army was enormous, while modern scholars believe the forces may have been closer in size than the dramatic accounts suggest. But everyone agrees that what happens here will become one of the most famous moments in Greek history: the Athenians attack. Instead of waiting behind defensive positions, the Greek hoplites charge forward across the open ground. Their heavy bronze armour glints in the sunlight as they run. The clash is sudden and intense. Persian archers release waves of arrows, but the armoured Greek soldiers close the distance quickly. Their long spears and disciplined formations push into the Persian lines. After fierce fighting, the Persian forces withdraw toward their ships. The Athenians have won. You watch as the battlefield slowly grows quiet again. Dust drifts through the air where soldiers once stood. The victory shocks the Greek world. A small city-state has defeated the army of the greatest empire on earth. Yet the story does not end here. Darius never abandoned his plan to bring Greece under Persian influence. But before another invasion can begin, the king dies around 486 BCE. Power passes to his son, Xerxes. Xerxes inherits an empire of immense wealth and strength, but he also inherits the unfinished conflict with Greece. You travel east to the royal court, where preparations for a new campaign are underway. The scale of planning is enormous. Engineers construct bridges across the narrow strait known as the Hellespont, allowing the Persian army to cross from Asia into Europe. Supply routes are carefully organised to support thousands of soldiers moving across unfamiliar terrain. Ancient writers describe Xerxes assembling one of the largest armies ever seen. But historians remain divided about the actual size of this force. Some scholars believe Greek sources exaggerated Persian numbers dramatically to make their eventual victories seem more impressive. Even if the army was smaller than the ancient texts suggest, it was still formidable. You walk beside the marching columns as they move slowly through the landscape of northern Greece. The sound of footsteps fills the valleys. Armour clinks softly. Horses snort and pull against their reins. Soldiers speak in dozens of different languages drawn from across the empire. Persia has come again, but the Greeks are not unprepared this time. City-states that once fought each other now form an alliance. Sparta sends its warriors. Athens prepares its fleet. Together they attempt to block the Persian advance. One of the most famous confrontations happens at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae. Here a small Greek force led by the Spartan king Leonidas attempts to delay the Persian army. The terrain is crucial. The narrow pass prevents the Persians from using their full numbers. For several days the Greek defenders hold their ground. You can hear the clash of shields echoing between the cliffs as waves of Persian soldiers attempt to break through. Eventually a hidden path allows Persian forces to outflank the defenders. The battle ends with the fall of the Spartan king and his warriors, yet their resistance becomes legendary. The war continues. Persian forces move south toward Athens. The city is evacuated. Then something unexpected happens. Athens chooses to fight not on land but at sea. You stand on the cliffs overlooking the narrow waters near the island of Salamis. Hundreds of ships fill the strait. Greek triremes move quickly through the confined space while the larger Persian fleet struggles to maneuver. The battle unfolds in chaotic waves of crashing wood and shouting sailors. When it ends, the Persian navy has suffered a devastating defeat. Soon after, Persian forces withdraw from mainland Greece. The war is not entirely over, but the momentum has shifted. As night falls across the quiet sea, you realize something important. The Persian Empire remains enormous and powerful, but for the first time its expansion has been stopped. A group of small, stubborn city-states has resisted the greatest empire of the ancient world, and far away in Persia, the consequences of this conflict will slowly begin reshaping the future of the empire itself. The wind carries dust across the plains of the Persian heartland. You stand on a hill overlooking a world that still belongs to the descendants of Cyrus. The Persian Empire continues to exist vast and wealthy, stretching across lands from Egypt to Central Asia. Cities thrive. Trade routes remain active. Royal administrators govern provinces in the king's name. Yet beneath the surface of stability, time has begun to change the empire. The wars with Greece did not destroy Persia. In fact, the empire continues to function for more than a century after those famous battles. Persian kings still rule from magnificent palaces. Tribute still flows from distant regions, but something subtle has shifted. Expansion has slowed, and far to the west new forces are rising. You travel through the bustling streets of Babylon, one of the great cities of the Persian world. Merchants still trade grain, spices and textiles beneath tall walls that have stood for centuries. Persian officials supervise taxation. Soldiers patrol the gates. The empire still feels immense, yet rumours arrive from distant lands. In the rugged northern regions of Greece, a new kingdom is growing stronger. Macedon. For generations, the Greek city-states treated Macedon as a rough and somewhat distant neighbour. But under a king named Philip II, Macedon becomes something different. Philip reforms his army. He introduces long spears known as sarissas, allowing soldiers to fight in dense formations that are difficult to break. He strengthens discipline and creates a professional military force unlike the part-time armies used by many Greek cities. Soon Macedon dominates Greece, and after Philip's assassination in 336 BCE, power passes to his young son, Alexander. You walk through the Macedonian capital where soldiers prepare for an ambitious campaign. Alexander is only 20 years old, yet he inherits his father's powerful army and an extraordinary ambition. His goal is not merely to rule Greece, he intends to conquer Persia. At first the idea seems almost impossible. The Persian Empire is still the largest political power in the known world. Its resources far exceed those of Macedon. But in 334 BCE, He crosses the narrow waters of the Hellespont with an army of around 40,000 soldiers. You watch the ships approach the Asian shore. The soldiers step onto Persian territory. The invasion has begun. The first major confrontation takes place near a river called the Granicus. Persian satraps gather local forces to stop the Macedonian advance. Cavalry units line the riverbanks. Greek mercenaries fighting for Persia stand ready behind them. The battle begins suddenly. Alexander leads a daring charge across the river directly into the Persian cavalry. Fighting becomes chaotic in the shallow water and muddy banks. Eventually the Macedonian forces push through. The Persian defenders retreat. It is only the beginning. Alexander continues south along the coast of Anatolia, capturing city after city. Some resist fiercely, others surrender quickly, hoping to avoid destruction. Historians still debate why Persian resistance was initially so disorganized. Some scholars believe local governors underestimated the young Macedonian king. Others argue that communication across the vast empire slowed the response. Whatever the reason, Alexander advances rapidly. Finally, in 333 BCE, he encounters the Persian king himself, Darius III. You stand on a wide plain near the town of Issus, where the two armies prepare for battle. The Persian army is large and diverse, made up of soldiers from many provinces of the empire. Cavalry units stretch across the field. Chariots wait behind the lines. The Macedonian army is smaller but highly disciplined. The tension is immense. When the battle begins, Alexander again leads the attack personally. His cavalry charges toward the center of the Persian line where the king's position can be seen. Fighting spreads across the battlefield. At a crucial moment, the Persian king's position becomes threatened. Darius turns his chariot and flees. The sight of the king retreating causes confusion throughout the Persian army. The battle collapses. Alexander has defeated the ruler of the greatest empire on earth. Yet the war is not over. Darius escapes eastward and begins gathering another army. Meanwhile, Alexander continues south toward the great cities of the eastern Mediterranean. You arrive at the ancient city of Tyre, which sits on an island just off the coast. Tyre refuses to surrender. The siege lasts for months. Engineers construct enormous causeways and siege towers. War machines pound the city walls. Eventually the Macedonian forces break through. Tyre falls. The campaign continues into Egypt. There's something surprising happens. Instead of resisting, many Egyptians welcome Alexander. They see him not as a foreign conqueror, but as a liberator from Persian rule. Alexander visits ancient temples along the Nile, and is even declared a divine ruler by Egyptian priests. It is an unusual moment in history. A Macedonian king now rules lands once controlled by Persia, Egypt, and Greece simultaneously. But the final confrontation with Persia still lies ahead. In 331 BCE, Alexander and Darius meet again, this time on a wide plain called Gaugamela. You stand among thousands of soldiers as both armies prepare for what will become one of the most decisive battles in ancient history. The Persian army is enormous. Darius has gathered forces from across the empire. War elephants, scythe chariots, massive cavalry units. The battlefield stretches farther than the eye can see. Yet once again, Alexander focuses his attack toward the center. Through careful maneuvering, his cavalry opens a gap in the Persian lines. Alexander drives directly toward the king. Darius flees once more. The Persian army collapses. With this defeat, the ancient empire created by Cyrus the Great effectively falls. Cities open their gates as the Macedonian conqueror. Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis itself. You walk through the once glorious terraces of Persepolis as Alexander enters the city. The palaces that symbolize Persian power now belong to a new ruler. Some ancient accounts claim that Alexander later allowed parts of the palace complex to burn during a celebration. Historians still debate whether this act was deliberate revenge for earlier Persian invasions of Greece, or simply the result of drunken chaos. Whatever the truth, the age of the Persian Empire has ended, yet something deeper survives. Persian culture, language, traditions. Empires may fall, but civilizations rarely disappear so easily. The night air over Persepolis feels strangely quiet. You walk slowly through the vast stone terraces, where the Persian kings once held their grand ceremonies. Columns rise into the darkness like silent guardians of vanished age. Broken fragments of carved reliefs lie scattered across the ground. The empire of Cyrus, Darius and Xerxes has fallen. Alexander of Macedon now controls the Persian world. Yet as you move through the ancient city, something becomes clear. Persia has not truly disappeared. Empires can collapse quickly. Armies can conquer cities in a single battle, but cultures are far more difficult to erase. Alexander himself seems to understand this. At first, he behaves like a Greek conqueror. His Macedonian soldiers celebrate their victories. Greek officers take control of Persian administrative centres. But gradually Alexander begins adopting elements of Persian royal tradition. You travel with his court as it moves through the cities of the former empire. In Babylon you notice Persian officials still managing the bureaucracy that keeps the city functioning. Tax records continue to be written. Grain shipments continue moving along canals and roads. Alexander does not dismantle the Persian administrative system. He uses it. This decision is one of the reasons his empire expands so rapidly. Instead of replacing everything, he merges Macedonian leadership with Persian institutions. You see this cultural blending in surprising ways. Alexander begins wearing certain elements of Persian royal clothing. He incorporates Persian nobles into his government. In some ceremonies, he even adopts forms of court ritual that had once been reserved for Persian kings. These actions create tension among his Macedonian officers. Many of them feel uncomfortable adopting customs they consider foreign. Some historians believe these cultural changes created deep divisions inside Alexander's inner circle. Scholars still debate how sincere Alexander's cultural integration truly was. Some researchers believe he genuinely wanted to build a shared empire combining Greek and Persian traditions. Others argue that his decisions were mainly practical, allowing him to rule a vast territory with fewer rebellions. The truth may lie somewhere between these interpretations, but regardless of his motivations, Persian culture begins influencing the new empire in subtle but lasting ways. You travel east toward the old Persian capital regions. Along the road, you pass villages where daily life continues almost unchanged despite the fall of the empire. Farmers still tend their fields. Craftsmen still shape pottery. Zoroastrian priests still tend sacred fires in quiet temples. Political rulers may change, but the rhythms of everyday life remain steady. In many regions, the people do not even see Alexander as entirely foreign. After all, he now claims the title of King of Persia. In fact, one of the most unusual events of Alexander's rule occurs in the city of Susa. You arrive during a massive ceremony where Alexander organizes a series of marriages between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen. The goal is clear. He hopes to unite the ruling elites of two civilizations. Alexander himself marries Roxana, a woman from Central Asia, and later also marries Persian princesses connected to the royal family of Darius. The ceremony in Susa includes thousands of participants. Greek soldiers marry Persian women. Feast lasts for days. Music and celebration fill the air. Yet historians remain divided about how successful this cultural blending truly was. Some scholars believe these marriages created lasting political alliances. Others think many of the unions dissolved quickly after Alexander's death, and the death arrives far sooner than anyone expected. In 323 BCE, Alexander becomes ill while in Babylon. After several days of worsening fever, he dies at the age of only 32. His empire has grown enormous, stretching from Greece to India, but he leaves behind no clear successor. What follows is chaos. You watch as Alexander's generals begin competing for control over different parts of the empire. These men, known as the Diadochi, divide the territory among themselves. Larger battles erupt between former allies. Gradually, the empire fragments into several smaller kingdoms. One of these states, the Seleucid Empire, controls much of the old Persian territory. The Seleucid rulers are Greek in origin, but they govern lands filled with Persian culture. Greek cities appear across the region. Greek language spreads through administration and trade. Yet Persian traditions remain deeply rooted in the population. Zoroastrian practices continue. Local languages survive. And many communities quietly preserve memories of the old Persian kings. In fact, even Greek historians writing centuries later still speak with admiration about Cyrus the Great and the early Persian Empire. One little-known detail from this era reveals just how strong Persian identity remained. Coins minted in some regions show rulers wearing Persian-style clothing even while using Greek inscriptions. It is a visual symbol of cultural blending, two worlds overlapping. As you walk through a marketplace in one of these mixed cities, you hear conversations in several languages at once. Greek merchants negotiate prices. Persian farmers sell grain and wool. Caravans from Central Asia bring exotic goods from distant lands. Civilizations rarely move in straight lines. Instead, they weave together through trade, migration, and shared experience. Even though the Persian Empire has officially ended, the people who lived within it continue shaping the future of this land. The Iranian plateau still holds its ancient traditions, and somewhere in the centuries ahead, a new power will rise from these lands, a new empire. One that will proudly reclaim the legacy of Persia. The wind moves across the wide grasslands of the eastern Iranian plateau. You ride slowly beside a caravan moving along a dusty road that stretches toward the horizon. The land feels vast and open here. Mountains rise in the far distance, but between them lie endless rolling plains where horsemen travel with remarkable speed. Centuries have passed since Alexander's death. His empire has fractured into competing kingdoms ruled by his former generals and their descendants. In much of the old Persian territory, the Seleucid Empire now claims authority. Greek language dominates royal courts. Greek architecture appears in new cities. Statues of Greek gods stand beside older temples built long before Alexander ever arrived. Yet beneath this visible layer of Hellenistic culture, another world continues quietly. Persian traditions remain alive among the people of the plateau. And in the eastern regions of the old empire, something new is beginning to grow. You begin hearing whispers among traders. They speak about powerful horsemen emerging from the northeastern lands beyond the Caspian Sea. Nomadic tribes, warriors who ride across the steppe with incredible skill. These people belong to a group known as the Pani part of a larger confederation called the Parthians. At first, the Seleucid rulers do not see them as a serious threat. Nomadic tribes have existed on the edges of empires for centuries. They raid occasionally, but they rarely create stable states of their own. But this time is different. You travel northeast toward the region known in at times as Parthia. The landscape becomes harsher as you move farther from the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia. Dry hills dominate the horizon. The air feels sharper, the wind stronger. This is a land where survival requires resilience. The Parthians thrive here. They're exceptional horsemen. From childhood, they learn to ride with extraordinary balance and control. Their most famous military skill becomes known as the Parthian shot. You watch as mounted archers gallop across the plains. Suddenly, one rider twists his body backward while still riding at full speed. He releases an arrow toward enemies chasing behind him. The arrow flies straight and deadly. This technique allows Parthian cavalry to attack while retreating, confusing and exhausting opposing armies. It becomes one of the most feared tactics in ancient warfare. Around the mid-3rd century BCE, a Parthian leader named Arsaces leads a rebellion against Seleucid authority in the region. You can imagine the tension as small Parthian forces begin challenging the control of the much larger Seleucid Empire. At first, the revolt seems minor, but Arsaces proves to be a clever and determined leader. Gradually, he and his followers capture territory across northeastern Iran. What begins as a local uprising slowly grows into a new political power. The Sassanid dynasty is born. You stand inside a Parthian camp as night falls across the plains. Fires burn in a wide circle while warriors gather to share food and stories. Their clothing is practical and suited for life on horseback. Unlike the formal courts of earlier Persian kings, Parthian leadership feels more tribal. Yet over time, the Parthians adopt many elements of earlier Persian culture. They rule cities that once belonged to the Achaemenid Empire. They govern agricultural regions requiring organized administration. Slowly, the Parthian state transforms from a nomadic confederation into a true empire. Historians continued debating how centralized the Parthian government actually was. Some scholars believe the empire functioned as a loose federation of powerful noble families rather than a tightly controlled monarchy. Local rulers maintained significant independence while acknowledging the authority of the Sassanid king. This flexible structure may have helped the Parthian Empire survive for centuries. By the 1st century BC, Parthian power stretches across much of Iran and Mesopotamia. Greek cultural influence remains present in some cities, but Persian traditions return to prominence across the region. Coins minted by Parthian kings display rulers wearing Iranian-style clothing rather than Greek attire. Zoroastrian practices continue, and the memory of ancient Persia slowly becomes part of Parthian identity. But the Parthians do not only face internal challenges. To the west, a new superpower has begun expanding. Rome. The Roman Republic is transforming into a massive empire controlling lands across the Mediterranean world. Soon Rome and Parthia become neighbours, two powerful civilizations facing each other across the lands of the Near East. You travel west toward the frontier regions where Roman and Parthian interests collide. In 53 BCE, one of the most famous confrontations between these worlds takes place. A Roman general named Marcus Licinius Crassus leads an army eastward into Parthian territory. Crassus is wealthy and ambitious. He hopes to win military glory by defeating the Parthians and expanding Roman influence. But he underestimates his opponent. The Parthian general Surena commands a highly mobile force of cavalry and mounted archers. You stand on a wide desert plain near a town called Kare. The Roman army forms its traditional infantry formations, shields locked tightly together. But the Parthian army fights differently. Mounted archers circle the Roman troops, releasing endless waves of arrows from a distance. Roman soldiers struggle to respond. Heavy armor protects them for a time, but the constant rain of arrows slowly weakens their formations. Then Parthian cavalry charges. The Roman army collapses. Crassus himself dies during the chaotic retreat. It becomes one of the most devastating defeats in Roman military history. The battle shocks the Roman world. A powerful Roman army has been destroyed by an Eastern empire many Romans barely understood. For the next several centuries, Rome and Parthia remain rivals across the Middle East. Their armies clash repeatedly. Their diplomats negotiate fragile peace agreements. And across the Iranian plateau, the legacy of Persia continues evolving. The empire of Cyrus may have vanished, but new powers now carry fragments of that ancient heritage forward, and the story of Iran is far from finished. The early morning air feels cool along the banks of the Euphrates. You stand on a dusty road overlooking a fortified city where traders, soldiers, and diplomats move through the gates in a steady stream. Caravans from distant lands arrive carrying spices, silk, and precious metals. Roman merchants speak loudly in Latin and Greek while Parthian officials observe from shaded archways. This region has become a frontier, not a simple border marked by walls, but a wide zone where two great civilizations meet. To the west lies the Roman world. To the east stretches the Parthian Empire. For centuries, these two powers will watch each other carefully across the lands of Mesopotamia and Armenia. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they negotiate, but neither side fully conquers the other. You walk through a marketplace where traders discuss the latest news from distant capitals. One merchant speaks about Rome's growing influence around the Mediterranean. Another describes Parthian cavalry patrolling the eastern plains. The balance between these two empires is delicate. Rome commands powerful legions trained for disciplined infantry combat. These soldiers march in tight formations carrying shields and short swords. Their engineering skills allow them to build fortified camps roads and siege machines wherever they travel. The Parthians, on the other hand, rely heavily on mobility. Their cavalry units move quickly across open terrain, striking enemies with mounted archers before disappearing again into the vast landscapes of the Iranian plateau. These two military systems are very different, and when they clash, the results can be unpredictable. You travel north toward the mountainous region of Armenia. This land sits between the Roman and Parthian worlds, and its rulers often find themselves balancing alliances between the two empires. Sometimes Armenia leans toward Rome. Sometimes it accepts Parthian influence. Historians often describe Armenia as a buffer kingdom, a place where diplomacy and rivalry constantly overlap. In the 1st century, CE tensions rise again between the two great powers. Roman emperors begin seeking greater control over the eastern territories. Meanwhile, Parthian kings wish to maintain their influence in Armenia and Mesopotamia. You arrive at a Roman military camp near the frontier. Rows of leather tents stretch across the ground in perfect order. Roman soldiers sharpen their weapons, repair armor, and practice formation drills under the watchful eyes of their officers. The discipline is impressive. Each legionary knows exactly where to stand, how to move, and when to strike. But Roman commanders also understand the challenges of fighting Parthian cavalry. Heavy infantry formations can struggle against fast-moving horse archers. To counter this, Rome begins adapting its strategies. Auxiliary units of cavalry and archers join the legions. Fortifications protect supply routes across difficult terrain. War between Rome and Parthia rarely produces permanent victory. Cities change hands, treaties are signed, then conflicts begin again. One little known detail reveals just how closely these rivals sometimes interacted. Despite their military rivalry, trade between the Roman and Parthian worlds continues regularly. Caravans travel along early sections of what will later become known as the Silk Road. Chinese silk reaches Roman markets through Parthian intermediaries. Roman glassware and luxury goods travel eastward in return. In some frontier cities, merchants from both empires share marketplaces even while their governments remain enemies. Here's a reminder that economic exchange often continues even during political conflict. As evening approaches, you sit beside a small caravan camp along the desert road. The sky slowly turns deep orange over the horizon. A Roman trader pours wine into a clay cup while speaking with a Parthian merchant about safe routes through the mountains. Their conversation feels almost peaceful. Yet not far away, armies continue preparing for future battles. Historians remain divided about how stable the Parthian Empire truly was during these centuries. Some researchers argue that the decentralized structure of Parthian rule allowed powerful noble families to maintain too much independence. This could weaken central authority during times of crisis. Others believe this flexible system actually helped the empire survive by allowing local leaders to manage regional challenges more effectively. Both interpretations reveal something important. The Parthian Empire was different from the earlier Persian Empire. Less centralized, more tribal in structure, yet still powerful enough to resist Rome for generations. But time moves quietly through history. By the 2nd century CE, signs of internal strain begin appearing inside the Parthian world. Rival factions compete for the throne. Local rulers challenge royal authority. And in the southwestern region of the Iranian plateau, a new dynasty begins rising quietly. You travel south toward the region once known as Persis. Here among the lands that once produced Cyrus the Great, a local noble family is gaining strength. Their leaders claim descent from the ancient Persian kings. Their ambitions are growing, and soon they will challenge the Parthian rulers for control of the Iranian world. The long memory of Persia is about to awaken once again. The dry wind sweeps softly across the hills of southern Iran. You ride through a landscape that feels ancient in a deeper way than most places you have visited so far. Scattered across the rocky terrain stand ruins that whisper of a distant golden age. Broken columns, weathered as stone staircases, fragments of relief carvings half buried in sand. These are the remains of Persepolis. Centuries have passed since Alexander's conquest. Yet the memory of the old Persian kings has never fully disappeared from the minds of the people living here. Local traditions still speak of Cyrus, of Darius, of the time when Persia ruled the world. And in this same region, a new power is quietly rising. The man at the center of this transformation is named Ardashir. He is the son of a local ruler in the region of Persis, the ancient homeland of the Persian people. His family governs as minor kings under the authority of the Parthian Empire. But Ardashir has larger ambitions. You first hear about him in conversations among merchants and soldiers traveling through the region. They speak about a young leader gathering supporters across southern Iran. At first it sounds like many other local revolts that have appeared throughout history. But Ardashir is patient and determined. He begins strengthening his control over nearby territories, slowly building alliances with local nobles who feel dissatisfied with Parthian rule. By the early 3rd century CE, the Parthian Empire has grown weaker. Internal conflicts between rival claimants to the throne have destabilized the central government. Powerful, noble families compete for influence. The once formidable Parthian system is beginning to fracture. Ardashir sees an opportunity. You travel with a group of horsemen moving across the plains toward a gathering point where Ardashir's forces are assembling. Warriors from different regions arrive carrying banners decorated with ancient Persian symbols. Many of them believe they are not merely fighting for power, they believe they are restoring Persia. In 224 CE, the decisive confrontation arrives. Ardashir faces the Parthian king Artabanus IV in battle. You stand on a dusty field where both armies prepare for combat. The Parthians still possess strong cavalry traditions, but their unity has weakened. Ardashir's supporters, on the other hand, are driven by a powerful sense of purpose. The battle unfolds with sudden intensity. Horsemen charge across the plain. Arrows cut through the air, spears clash against shields. By the end of the fighting, Artabanus is defeated. The Parthian Empire collapses. A new dynasty takes its place, the Sasanian Empire. Ardashir now declares himself Shahanshah, King of Kings. It is the same ancient title used by the great rulers of the Achaemenid Persian Empire centuries earlier. The message is clear. Persia has returned. You travel to the new royal court where Ardashir begins shaping his empire. Unlike the Parthians, whose government often relied on powerful noble families, the Sasanian rulers attempt to create a stronger centralized state. Royal authority becomes more direct. Administrative systems are reorganized. Taxation is carefully structured to support a powerful army and royal infrastructure. One of Ardashir's most important decisions involves religion. Zoroastrianism, the ancient faith you encountered earlier in your journey, becomes closely connected to the new Sasanian state. Priests known as magi gain greater influence within society. Fire temples are restored and expanded. Religious texts begin to be collected and standardized. Some historians believe the Sassanians attempted to create a more formal religious structure than existed during earlier Persian periods. Yet scholars still debate how unified Zoroastrian belief truly was during this time. Different regional traditions may have continued existing alongside official state religion. Nevertheless, religion now plays a powerful role in supporting royal authority. You walk through the newly developed city of Ctesiphon, which becomes one of the main capitals of the Sasanian Empire. The city stands along the banks of the Tigris River near the ancient lands of Mesopotamia. Its most famous structure rises before you, a massive vaulted hall known today as the Tak Kasra. The arch is enormous, towering high above the surrounding buildings. When sunlight passes through the open end of the hall, the entire interior glows with warm light. It's one of the greatest architectural achievements of the ancient world. Inside the palace complex, court ceremonies emphasize the grandeur of the king. Diplomats from distant lands bow before the throne. Rich fabrics and golden decorations reflect the wealth of the empire. The Sasanian state quickly grows strong. Persian art flourishes. Metalwork textiles and stone carving show remarkable craftsmanship. Royal imagery often portrays the king receiving divine authority from Ahura Mazda. But beyond the splendor of the court, another familiar pattern begins appearing. To the west lies Rome, and once again Persia finds itself facing its great western rival. The Roman Empire still dominates the Mediterranean world. The Sasanian Empire now controls much of the Middle East and the Iranian plateau. Two powerful civilizations now stand face to face. Their armies will clash repeatedly across the centuries ahead, but for the moment, standing beneath the towering arch of Ctesiphon, you feel the powerful sense of renewal spreading across the Persian world. The old empire of Cyrus had vanished long ago, yet its spirit has returned in a new form. The Sasanian kings proudly carry the memory of ancient Persia into a new era of power, and the land that will one day be called Iran once again stands at the center of world history. The morning sun reflects softly on the wide waters of the Tigris River. You stand along the riverbank outside the great Sasanian capital of Ctesiphon. The city is alive with movement. Merchants unload goods from riverboats. Caravan animals drink from the muddy shore. Soldiers patrol the roads leading toward the palace complex. The Sasanian Empire is now firmly established. Ardashir's victory over the Parthians has reshaped the political landscape of the Iranian world. But maintaining such a powerful state requires more than one successful rebellion. It requires generations of strong rulers. And for the next several centuries, the Sasanian kings will attempt to restore the full glory of ancient Persia. You walk through the palace district where royal officials move quickly between administrative buildings carrying scrolls and clay documents. Tax records are carefully recorded. Military orders travel along imperial roads connecting distant provinces. The empire stretches across a vast territory. To the east lie the deserts and mountains of Central Asia. To the west lie the contested lands near the Roman frontier. To the south, the warm waters of the Persian Gulf connect the empire to long-distance trade routes reaching India and beyond. Under the Sassanians, the Persian state becomes highly organized. Society develops a structured hierarchy. At the top stands the Shahanshah, the king of kings. Beneath him are powerful noble families who control large estates and provide military support. Priests hold significant authority through the Zoroastrian religious institutions. Skilled artisans, merchants, and farmers form the economic foundation of the empire. The structure is complex but effective. One little-known detail from this period reveals how organized the Sasanian government becomes. Officials maintain detailed tax records that classify land according to its agricultural productivity. Regions capable of producing more grain or valuable crops contribute greater revenue to the royal treasury. This systematic taxation helps finance large armies and ambitious construction projects. You travel through the countryside where irrigation canals bring life to otherwise dry lands. Farmers cultivate wheat, dates, and other crops that support growing urban populations. In many places, ancient Persian engineering knowledge helps transform difficult landscapes into productive farmland. But while internal organization strengthens the empire, the western frontier remains tense. Beyond the mountains of Mesopotamia lies the Roman Empire. For centuries, Rome has been Persia's greatest rival. Now that rivalry intensifies once again, you ride west with a group of Sassanian cavalry approaching the frontier region near the city of Nisibis. Roman fortresses rise along the hills. Watchtowers scan the horizon. Both empires maintain large military forces along this border. Sometimes diplomacy keeps the peace. Envoys travel between royal courts carrying messages and gifts. Treaties establish temporary boundaries. But these agreements rarely last forever. One of the most famous confrontations between the Sassanians and Rome occurs during the reign of a king named Shapur I. Shapur rules in the 3rd century CE and proves to be a bold and capable leader. You arrive at a battlefield where Roman and Persian forces prepare to clash once again. The Roman army is commanded by the emperor Valerian himself. Roman soldiers stand in disciplined formations beneath their banners. Across the field, Persian cavalry waits with archers and armoured horsemen. The battle begins with thunderous movement across the plains. Roman infantry advances steadily. Persian cavalry sweeps across the battlefield with incredible speed. Dust fills the air as arrows streak across the sky. When the fighting finally ends, something extraordinary has happened. The Roman Emperor Valerian has been captured. It's one of the most shocking moments in Roman history. Never before has a Roman emperor been taken prisoner by a foreign ruler. Later Persian relief carvings will depict this moment. You travel to a cliff face at Nakshi-Rustam, where a massive stone relief shows Shapur on horseback with the defeated Roman emperor kneeling before him. The message carved into stone is clear. Persia has defeated Rome. Yet historians still debate what happened to Valerian after his capture. Some ancient Roman sources claim he was treated harshly or humiliated by the Persian king. Other historians believe these stories may have been exaggerated by Roman writers embarrassed by the defeat. What is certain is that the event demonstrates the immense power of the Sasanian Empire during this period. But like all empires, the Sassanians face challenges beyond warfare. Religious diversity grows within their territory. While Zoroastrianism remains the official faith, other communities flourish as well. Christian communities expand across Mesopotamia. Jewish scholars continue developing religious traditions in cities such as Babylon. Manichaeism. A new religious movement founded by a prophet named Mani spreads rapidly across the region. Some Sassanian rulers tolerate these different traditions. Others attempt to suppress them. Scholars continue debating how tolerant or restrictive Sassanian religious policy truly was across different periods. But walking through the markets of Ctesiphon, you hear many languages and see people practicing many customs. Civilizations rarely remain simple. They grow layered over time. As evening settles over, the capital lanterns begin glowing along the streets. The enormous arch of the royal palace stands silhouetted against the fading sky. The Sasanian Empire has restored Persian power across the Iranian world, yet history continues moving forward. And beyond the deserts to the south, a new force is slowly gathering that will soon change the fate of Persia forever. The desert night is quiet. You stand beneath a sky filled with bright stars somewhere along the southern edges of the Persian world. The air is cool now, though during the day this land burns with intense heat. Low hills stretch across the horizon, broken only by small oasis settlements and winding caravan routes. For centuries, the great empires of the Near East have focused their attention on rival powers like Rome. Few rulers pay much attention to the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. Yet in the early 7th century, something extraordinary begins to emerge from this region. You arrive in the trading city of Mecca. The city sits among dry mountains, its houses built from stone and mud brick. Caravans pass through, regularly connecting the Red Sea trade routes with inland markets. Merchants sell spices, leather, incense, and textiles. But Mecca is more than a trading hub. At its center stands a sacred sanctuary called the Kaaba. Tribes from across Arabia visit the site for religious rituals connected to ancient traditions. And in this city, around the year 610 CE, a man named Muhammad begins preaching a new religious message. You walk quietly through the early gatherings where followers listen to his words. He speaks of a single God, of justice, of moral responsibility. His teachings emphasize compassion, charity, and the equality of believers before God. At first, only a small group listens, but the message spreads. Historians continue discussing how quickly Muhammad's teachings gained influence across Arabia. Some researchers believe the social and political divisions within Arabian tribes created fertile ground for a unifying religious movement. Others emphasize the power of the spiritual message itself. What is certain is that within a few decades, the Arabian Peninsula becomes united under a new religious community, Islam. After Muhammad's death in 632 CE, his followers begin expanding beyond Arabia. Arab armies move northward, and suddenly the two great empires that had dominated the region for centuries face a new challenge. Both the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of Rome, and the Sasanian Persian Empire have been weakened by long wars against each other. Decades of conflict have drained their treasuries and exhausted their armies. You travel to the frontier regions where Persian forces once guarded the empire's western borders. But the situation is changing quickly. Arab armies motivated by religious unity and skilled desert warfare move with remarkable speed across the landscape. In 636 CE, one of the most decisive battles takes place, the Battle of Qadisiyah. You stand on the dusty plains near the Euphrates River where the Persian army prepares to defend its territory. War elephants stand behind the Persian lines towering above the soldiers. Cavalry units wait with drawn bows. Across the field, Arab forces gather beneath banners marked with verses from the Quran. The battle lasts several days. Dust storms sweep across the battlefield. Clashes erupt between infantry and cavalry. Eventually, the Persian army collapses. The defeat opens the path toward the heart of the Sasanian Empire. Arab forces move deeper into Mesopotamia. Cities that once formed the backbone of Persian power begin falling one after another. You walk through the once magnificent capital of Ctesiphon as new rulers enter the city. The vast palace halls stand silent. Treasures accumulated over centuries are taken as spoils of war. The empire that restored Persian glory only 400 years earlier is now unraveling. The last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III, flees eastward, attempting to gather support for resistance. You follow his path across the Iranian plateau. He travels from city to city seeking allies. But the empire has grown too fragmented. Local leaders hesitate to commit their forces. Arab armies continue advancing. Finally, in 651 CE, the last Sasanian ruler dies while still in exile. The Sasanian Empire has ended. The Iranian world now becomes part of the expanding Islamic Caliphate. At first, the transformation feels overwhelming. New governors arrive. Arabic becomes the language of administration. Islam spreads gradually among the population. Yet something familiar begins happening once again. Persian culture does not disappear. You walk through villages where farmers still speak early forms of the Persian language. Local traditions remain alive within families and communities. Zoroastrian priests continue practicing their rituals in some regions. Scholars translate Persian knowledge into Arabic, helping shape the intellectual life of the growing Islamic world. Historians often describe this period not simply as conquest, but as cultural blending. Persian administrators help organize the caliphate's government. Persian poets and scholars contribute to literature, philosophy, and science. Gradually, a new identity begins forming. Persian culture and Islamic civilization intertwine. The ancient land of Persia has entered a new chapter. The empire of the Sasanian kings may have fallen, but the story of the Iranian world is far from over, because in the centuries ahead, Persian language, literature, and identity will quietly re-emerge stronger than ever. The first light of dawn spreads across the Iranian plateau once again. You walk through a quiet village where life continues with the same gentle rhythm that has existed here for thousands of years. Farmers step into the fields carrying wooden tools. Donkeys move slowly along narrow paths between mud brick houses. The distant sound of water flowing through irrigation channels echoes softly through the cool morning air. Empires have fallen. Armies have marched across this land. New rulers now governed from distant capitals of the Islamic Caliphate. Yet the people who live here continue speaking their own language. They continue telling their own stories. Persia as a political empire may have ended, but Persian culture remains deeply alive. At first, the new Islamic rulers govern the region through Arabic administration. Arabic becomes the language of official records and religious scholarship. Many early governors come from Arab tribes who helped build the rapidly expanding caliphate. But the Iranian world is vast and complex. Administrators quickly realize that governing these lands requires cooperation with local populations who possess centuries of experience managing agriculture, taxation, and trade networks. You travel to the city of Nishapur, one of the growing urban centers in eastern Iran. In the crowded bazaar, you hear multiple languages spoken at once. Arabic merchants discuss trade routes. Persian farmers negotiate the price of grain. Travelers from Central Asia and India bring textiles, spices, and rare goods. The blending of cultures is constant. Gradually, Persian language begins reappearing in written form. Earlier versions of the language had existed for centuries, but during the Sasanian period, much official writing uses Middle Persian scripts connected to Zoroastrian tradition. Under Islamic rule, something interesting happens. Persian language begins using the Arabic alphabet. This adaptation allows Persian writers to participate more easily in the intellectual world of the Islamic Caliphate while still preserving their own linguistic identity. Historians sometimes call this transformation the birth of New Persian. You visit a small school where students sit on woven mats, listening to a teacher recite poetry. The verses flow smoothly, rich with imagery drawn from nature and ancient tradition. Persian poetry becomes one of the most important vehicles for preserving cultural memory. One of the earliest great Persian poets is a man named Rudaki, who lives in the 9th and 10th centuries. Rudaki writes lyrical verses describing gardens, music, and human emotions with remarkable elegance. His work helps establish Persian literature as a powerful cultural force once again. Yet poets are not the only figures shaping this revival. Across the Iranian world, scholars contribute to science, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy within the broader Islamic intellectual tradition. You travel to the city of Bukhara, which becomes a center of learning during this era. Libraries contain manuscripts written in Arabic and Persian. Scholars debate philosophy late into the night beneath oil lamps. One young student in this environment will later become one of the most influential thinkers of the medieval world. His name is Ibn Sina. In the West, he will later be known as Avicenna. Born in 980 CE near Bukhara, Ibn Sina writes works on medicine, logic, and philosophy that will influence scholars for centuries across both the Islamic world and medieval Europe. His famous medical encyclopedia, The Canon of Medicine, becomes a foundational text studied in universities for hundreds of years. Yet historians sometimes debate how these scholars should be classified. Many of them write primarily in Arabic because it is the scholarly language of the time. At the same time, they come from Persian cultural backgrounds and contribute strongly to Persian intellectual traditions. It's another example of how civilizations blend rather than simply replace one another. Meanwhile, Persian storytelling traditions continue evolving. You sit in a crowded marketplace where a storyteller gathers listeners around him. His voice rises and falls dramatically as he recounts the adventures of legendary heroes from ancient Persia. Warriors who battled monsters, kings who ruled with wisdom, heroes who defended their homeland. These stories have been passed down orally for generations, but soon one poet will bring them together into one of the greatest literary works in world history. His name is Ferdowsi. Around the year 1000 CE, Ferdowsi completes a massive epic poem called the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. It contains more than 50,000 verses telling the legendary and historical story of Persian civilization from its mythical beginnings to the fall of the Sassanid Empire. You watch as a manuscript of the Shahnameh is carefully copied by scribes. Each page is decorated with beautiful illustrations showing scenes of battles, royal courts, and heroic adventures. The poem becomes something more than literature. It becomes a cultural anchor. For Angkor, at a time when Persia no longer exists as an independent empire, the Shahnameh preserves the memory of Persian identity. Historians often note that Ferdowsi deliberately used very few Arabic words in his writing. Instead, he focused on preserving the Persian language as purely as possible. Scholars still debate how intentional this linguistic preservation truly was, but its impact is undeniable. Generations of the readers grow up hearing the ancient stories of Persian heroes. The memory of Cyrus, Darius, and the great kings of the past never disappears. As evening approaches in the village where your journey began today, the sky turns a soft shade of gold above the mountains. Children gather near the fire while an elder begins telling one of those old stories once again. The Empire of Persia may have vanished long ago, but its spirit continues living quietly in language, poetry, and memory. And soon that cultural identity will begin shaping new political powers across the Iranian world. The morning sun rises gently over the domes of a bustling city. You stand on a hill overlooking Bukhara, one of the most vibrant centers of learning in the Eastern Islamic world. The city wakes slowly. Merchants open wooden stalls in the marketplace. Scholars walk towards schools carrying manuscripts wrapped in cloth. The scent of bread baking in clay ovens drifts through the narrow streets. This is a different kind of empire than the ones you saw earlier in your journey. No single Persian king rules the entire plateau now. Instead, various dynasties govern different regions of the Iranian world. Yet many of these rulers are deeply influenced by Persian culture and traditions. One of the most important of these dynasties is the Samanid dynasty. The Samanids rule large parts of eastern Iran and Central Asia during the 9th and 10th centuries. Their capital cities, including Bukhara and Samarkand, become centers of scholarship, literature, and trade. Although the Samanid rulers are loyal to the broad Islamic caliphate, they strongly support Persian culture. In fact, many historians consider the Samanid period the beginning of a true Persian cultural renaissance. You walk through the city's grand marketplace. Colourful fabrics hang from wooden beams above the stalls. Traders speak several languages while bargaining for goods from distant lands. Silk arrives from China. Precious stones come from the mountains of Central Asia. Spices travel north from India. The Silk Road passes directly through cities like Bukhara. Caravans travelling between east and west bring not only goods but also ideas. Philosophy, science, mathematics, astronomy. Inside one of the city's learning centres, you sit quietly among students listening to a lecture about the movement of stars. Scholars carefully observe the night sky and record the positions of planets. Their work helps refine astronomical knowledge inherited from earlier Greek, Persian, and Indian traditions. This blending of intellectual traditions becomes one of the great strengths of the Islamic Golden Age. Many of the scholars you encounter come from Persian backgrounds. Yet they write in Arabic, the scholarly language shared across the Islamic world. Historians still discuss how to understand this cultural combination. Some researchers describe it as Islamic civilization enriched by Persian intellectual traditions. Others emphasize that Persian scholars played a leading role in shaping the scientific achievements of the era. Either way, the result is remarkable. Persian culture is not disappearing. It is expanding in new directions. You visit a library filled with manuscripts written on carefully prepared paper. One unusual detail stands out. Paper itself has recently become more widely available in this region. The technology for making paper originally spread westward from China through Central Asia after the 8th century. Before this development, most manuscripts were written on parchment made from animal skins, which was expensive and difficult to produce in large quantities. Paper changes everything. Books become more affordable. Knowledge spreads faster. Libraries grow rapidly across cities of the Iranian world. In the evening, you walk through a garden where poets gather to recite their work. Music floats through the air as instruments accompany the spoken verses. Listeners sit on carpets beneath trees while lanterns glow softly among the branches. The Persian language is flourishing again. Poets use vivid imagery drawn from nature. Gardens, rivers, night skies filled with the stars. These themes appear again and again in Persian literature. One reason gardens hold such importance in Persian poetry is the landscape itself. Large parts of the Iranian plateau are dry and harsh. Creating a garden requires careful engineering with irrigation channels, flowing water and shade trees. A garden becomes a symbol of harmony between humanity and nature. Many Persian rulers design elaborate gardens near their palaces, reflecting ancient ideas of paradise. In fact, the word paradise itself comes from an ancient Persian term referring to enclosed gardens. You watch as a poet finishes reciting a verse about spring flowers blooming after winter rains. The audience applauds softly. Moments like this show how deeply Persian culture continues shaping everyday life. But outside these peaceful gatherings, the political world remains unstable. The Sassanid dynasty eventually weakens under pressure from rising Turkic powers. New groups of warriors from Central Asia begin entering the Iranian world. They adopt Persian culture and Islamic religion, but they also bring new political dynamics. Historians often debate how these Turkic dynasties should be understood. Some scholars describe them as foreign conquerors ruling Persian lands. Others argue that many of these rulers quickly became integrated into Persian cultural traditions. Either way, the result is another transformation. Persian language and culture continue spreading even under new rulers. Courts across the region adopt Persian poetry. Administrators use Persian for government records. The cultural identity of Persia becomes stronger than any single dynasty. As night settles over Bukhara, the city glows with hundreds of lanterns. Scholars continue reading manuscripts beneath flickering light. Caravans prepare for long journeys across the desert. And across the Iranian world, the quiet renaissance of Persian culture continues shaping the future of the land that will one day be called Iran. The wind moves grandiously across the high plateau once again. You ride along a narrow caravan path where the land stretches endlessly in shades of brown and gold. Snow-capped mountains rise in the distance while small villages appear like islands of life among dry hills and scattered fields. Centuries have passed since the great Persian empires of the ancient world. Yet the Iranian plateau remains a crossroads. Caravans still travel between east and west, cultures continue blending. New dynasties rise and fall across the region. You arrive in a growing city where banners flutter above the walls. Soldiers stand guard at the gates, their armour reflecting sunlight as travellers approach from the surrounding countryside. The ruler of this region belongs to a powerful new dynasty, the Ghaznavids. Originally rising from Central Asian military traditions, the Ghaznavid rulers establish a kingdom stretching across eastern Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of northern India during the 10th and 11th centuries. At first glance, their origins appear quite different from the ancient Persian kings you encountered earlier in your journey. Many Ghaznavid rulers come from Turkic military backgrounds. Yet when you walk through their royal court, something surprising becomes clear. Persian culture dominates the atmosphere. Court poets compose verses in Persian. Administrators keep records in Persian. Royal ceremonies borrow heavily from earlier Persian traditions. It's another example of how deeply Persian identity continues shaping the region, even when the ruling families themselves come from different ethnic origins. You sit quietly inside the palace courtyard while a court poet presents a new work praising the ruler. His verses flow with elegant metaphors describing gardens flowing, water, heroic warriors, and the greatness of the kingdom. Poetry remains one of the most respected forms of expression in Persian society. Historians often remark that Persian courts across many dynasties supported poets, scholars, and artists as a way to demonstrate cultural sophistication. But beyond the beauty of court life, the political landscape of the Iranian world remains complex. Different dynasties compete for power across various regions. The Ghaznavids control important eastern territories. In the west, other local rulers struggle to maintain influence. Meanwhile, new groups of nomadic warriors continue moving southward from the vast grasslands of Central Asia. You travel north toward the steppes, where these movements begin. The landscape changes dramatically. Grasslands stretch across the horizon, providing ideal conditions for large horse herds. Nomadic tribes move seasonally with their animals, living in portable felt tents known as yurts. Among these groups are the Seljuks. Originally part of the Oghuz Turkic tribes, the Seljuks begin migrating toward the Iranian plateau during the 11th century. At first they appear as raiders and mercenaries, but their leaders quickly realize that the lands of Persia offer opportunities far greater than temporary raids. Under a leader named Tughril Beg, the Seljuks begin capturing major cities across the Iranian world. You arrive in the city of Nishapur, where news of Seljuk victories spreads rapidly through the markets. Merchants whisper about changing rulers. Soldiers prepare for new loyalties. Within a few decades, the Seljuks establish a vast empire stretching across Iran, Iraq, and parts of Anatolia. Yet once again, the pattern you have seen before repeats itself. Although the Seljuks come from nomadic Turkic backgrounds, they adopt Persian administrative traditions almost immediately. Persian officials help organize government institutions. Persian language becomes the language of the court. Even the architecture of Seljuk cities reflects Persian artistic influence. You walk through one of the great Seljuk cities where newly constructed mosques rise above the skyline. Their brick walls are decorated with intricate geometric patterns. Tall minarets call the faithful to prayer 5 times each day. The Seljuk rulers support religious schools known as madrasas, helping spread Islamic scholarship throughout the region. One of the most famous intellectual figures connected to this era is a man named Omar Khayyam. You sit in a quiet garden in the city of Isfahan where Khayyam studies mathematics and astronomy. Although many people today remember him primarily as a poet, Khayyam is also a brilliant scientist. He contributes to improvements in calendar calculation and writes treatises on algebra that influence later generations of mathematicians. Scholars remain fascinated by how figures like Khayyam combined scientific inquiry with philosophical reflection and poetic expression. His famous quatrains, later translated into many languages, explore themes of time, fate, and the fleeting nature of life. The blend of science, philosophy, and poetry reflects the intellectual richness of Persian culture during this period. But the Seljuk Empire, like many before it, eventually begins facing internal challenges. After the death of strong early rulers, the empire fragments into smaller states controlled by competing princes. Local leaders gain independence. Trade routes become less secure. And beyond the eastern horizon, another new force is beginning to move westward across the steppes. A force unlike anything the Iranian world has seen before. You ride across the open plains, watching clouds gather over the distant mountains. The quiet land seems peaceful, yet in the centuries ahead, powerful storms of conquest will once again sweep across the Iranian plateau, and the people of Persia will face one of the most devastating invasions in their long history. The wind grows colder as you travel across the wide plains of Central Asia. The sky stretches endlessly above you, pale blue during the day and filled with sharp stars at night. Herds of horses graze across the grasslands while riders move silently across the horizon. For centuries, nomadic tribes have lived here, adapting to the rhythms of the steppe. They move with the seasons, following pasture and water. Their homes are portable, their warriors are trained from childhood to ride and fight. But in the early 13th century, something extraordinary begins to happen. These scattered tribes begin to unite, and at the center of that transformation stands a man named Temujin. History will remember him by another name, Genghis Khan. You ride toward a gathering of tribal leaders where warriors from many clans have assembled. Banners ripple in the wind as horsemen circle the open ground. Temujin has spent years building alliances among rival tribes. Through diplomacy, marriage alliances, and fierce battles, he gradually unites large parts of the Mongol world under his leadership. In 1206, the tribes proclaim him Genghis Khan, supreme ruler. From that moment forward, the Mongol armies begin expanding across Eurasia with astonishing speed. At first, their conquests move eastward into northern China, but soon their attention turns west. You follow the advance of Mongol scouts as they approach the borders of the Iranian world. At this time, the lands of Persia are governed by the Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful state that controls large parts of Central Asia and Iran. The Khwarezmian ruler believes his empire is strong enough to resist the Mongols. Historians still debate whether a series of diplomatic misunderstandings or deliberate provocations led to the coming conflict. According to several accounts, Genghis Khan initially attempted to establish trade relations with the Khwarezmian ruler, but when Mongol envoys were killed by the local officials, the Mongol leader considered it a grave insult. The response would be devastating. You stand on a hill overlooking the city of Otrar where Mongol forces begin their campaign. Their armies move quickly across the landscape using tactics unfamiliar to many settled civilizations. Mongol cavalry travels long distances at incredible speed. Riders carry several horses, allowing them to change mounts during long journeys. Their archers can shoot accurately while galloping across open terrain. Communication between units happens through signal flags, drums, and mounted messengers. Cities that resist are besieged. You watch as one fortress after another falls. Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand. Each city faces the same terrifying reality. The Mongol armies seem unstoppable. Historians still debate the true scale of destruction caused during the Mongol invasions. Some medieval chroniclers describe enormous massacres and the near destruction of entire cities. Other scholars suggest that while the violence was fierce, some accounts may have exaggerated the numbers over time. But there is no doubt that the Mongol conquest dramatically reshaped the Iranian world. You walk through the streets of Bukhara after the Mongol capture of the city. Many buildings stand damaged. Markets that once bustled with traders now feel quiet and uncertain. Yet even in the midst of devastation, something unexpected begins to happen. The Mongols gradually shift from conquerors to rulers. After the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, his vast empire is divided among his sons and grandsons. The lands of Persia eventually fall under the control of a Mongol ruler named Hulagu Khan. Hulagu establishes a new Mongol state in the region known as the Ilkhanate. At first, the Mongol rulers maintain their own traditions. Their courts include nomadic customs from the steppe. Their armies remain dominated by mounted warriors. But over time, the pattern you have seen throughout this journey begins repeating once again. Persian culture influences the new rulers. Persian administrators help manage taxation and government systems. Persian scholars advise the Mongol court. Gradually, the Mongol elite begins adopting elements of Persian culture and Islam. One of the most fascinating figures of this era is the Ilkhanid ruler Ghazan Khan. When Ghazan converts to Islam in 1295, it marks a major turning point. The Mongol rulers of Persia now fully integrate into the cultural and religious world of the region. Cities begin rebuilding. Trade routes across Asia reopen under the stability provided by Mongol rule. This period becomes part of what historians used to call the Pax Mongolica, a time when travel and commerce across Eurasia become easier than they had been for centuries. You walk through the restored streets of Tabriz, one of the Ilkhanate capitals. Caravans arrive carrying silk from China and spices from India. European merchants appear in markets alongside traders from Central Asia. Persian artists produce beautiful manuscripts filled with delicate illustrations combining Persian and East Asian artistic styles. It's a strange and fascinating fusion of cultures. Even after the violence of conquest, Persian civilization proves remarkably resilient. The language survives. The poetry continues. The traditions adapt to new rulers once again. As evening falls across the rebuilt city, lanterns glow softly in the marketplace. Children run through the streets while musicians play gentle melodies nearby. Empires rise and fall. Invaders arrive and eventually become part of the land they conquer. And through all of it, the cultural heart of Persia continues beating quietly beneath the surface of history. The evening sky glows softly above the city of Isfahan. You walk slowly along the wide avenue lined with trees and flowing water channels. The sound of fountains mixes with quiet conversation from people strolling through the gardens. Merchants close their shops for the night while lanterns begin to flicker to life across the city. The Iranian world has changed many times during the centuries of your journey. Ancient Persian kings, Greek conquerors, Parthian horsemen, Sassanid emperors, Islamic dynasties, Mongol rulers, each wave of power reshaped the land. Yet by the beginning of the 16th century, something new is about to emerge. A dynasty that will define the identity of Iran in ways that continue to shape the country even today. You first hear the name in the mountainous regions of northwestern Iran. Safavid. The story begins not with a king or general, but with a spiritual movement. Several centuries earlier, a mystic named Safi al-Din had founded a religious order in the city of Ardabil. His followers formed a Sufi brotherhood devoted to spiritual devotion and discipline. At first, the Safavid order focused primarily on religious teachings, but over generations the movement began attracting growing numbers of followers, particularly among Turkic-speaking tribes living in the surrounding regions. By the late 15th century, the Safavid order had transformed into a powerful political force. At the center of this transformation stands a young leader named Ismail. You watch as riders gather beneath crimson banners in the hills of Azerbaijan. Ismail is only a teenager, yet his supporters believe he possesses extraordinary spiritual authority. Many of them see him not only as a political leader, but also as a sacred figure destined to reshape the world. Historians still debate how much of this devotion was based on genuine religious belief and how much resulted from political ambition. But the loyalty of Ismail's followers is undeniable. They call themselves the Kizilbash. The name means redheads, referring to the distinctive red headgear they wear in battle. In 1501, Ismail leads his followers south toward the city of Tabriz. The battle for control of the region unfolds quickly. Local rulers are defeated. Cities open their gates, and at the age of just 14, Ismail enters Tabriz and proclaims himself Shah, king, but his ambitions extend far beyond one city. Ismail declares the creation of a new state, the Safavid Empire. You walk through Tabriz as the young ruler establishes his court. Crowds gather in the streets while soldiers patrol the city gates. Persian administrators begin organizing government institutions for the new dynasty. Yet Ismail introduces a decision that will transform the Iranian world forever. He declares Twelver Shia Islam as the official religion of the Safavid state. This is a dramatic shift. Most of the Islamic world at this time follows Sunni Islam. By promoting Shia Islam, Ismail creates a distinct religious identity for his new empire. Historians continue debating why he made this decision. Some scholars believe Ismail genuinely believed in Shia theology and sought to create a spiritual state based on those teachings. Others suggest the choice had strategic political advantages. By adopting Shia Islam, the Safavid rulers could differentiate their empire from their powerful Sunni rivals, particularly the Ottoman Empire to the west. Whatever the motivations, the impact is enormous. Religious scholars arrive from regions such as Lebanon and Iraq to help establish Shia institutions across the empire. Mosques and schools begin teaching Shia religious traditions. Over time, the population gradually adopts this new religious identity. The process is not always peaceful. In some regions, resistance appears from communities accustomed to different religious traditions. Historians still debate how rapidly these changes occurred and how much force was used in promoting the new state religion. But within a few generations, Shia Islam becomes deeply rooted across the Iranian world. This transformation will shape Iranian identity for centuries. Meanwhile, the Safavid state continues expanding. Ismail and his successors consolidate control over large parts of the Iranian plateau. Persian culture flourishes once again under royal patronage. Poetry, miniature painting and architecture thrive within Safavid courts, and the capital eventually moves to the magnificent city of Isfahan. You walk through its grand central square, one of the largest public spaces ever built in the Middle East. Mosques rise on two sides of the square with domes covered in brilliant blue tiles. Markets stretch along long arcades filled with merchants selling carpet, spices and metalwork. Horsemen play polo in the open field at the center of the square while spectators watch from shaded platforms. The Safavid Empire has created something remarkable. For the first time in centuries, a powerful and unified Persian state once again controls the Iranian plateau. And now more than ever before, a new identity is beginning to take shape. Not just Persia, but the early foundations of what the world will eventually recognize as Iran. Word count 1171. Morning light spreads across the magnificent city of Isfahan. You stand at the edge of a vast open square as the city slowly awakens. The enormous plaza stretches farther than the eye expects, surrounded by arcades filled with shops and workshops. Horses move across the open space while merchants arrange carpets, ceramics and spices for the day's trade. This place is known as Naksh-e-Jahan Square, the image of the world. It was built during the reign of one of the most powerful Safavid rulers, Shah Abbas I. Under Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire enters its golden age. You walk beneath the elegant arches lining the square where artisans hammer delicate designs into copper trays while jewelers carefully arrange gemstones under morning sunlight. Shah Abbas has transformed Isfahan into one of the most impressive cities in the world. In the early 17th century, travellers from Europe, India and the Ottoman world described the city with amazement. Wide boulevards lined with trees stretch through carefully designed gardens. Bridges cross the Zayande River with graceful arches reflected in the water below. Caravanserais provide shelter for traders arriving from distant lands, and everywhere architecture displays remarkable beauty. You step inside the Shah Mosque at the southern edge of the square. Its entrance portal rises high above you, covered in intricate blue and turquoise tiles forming geometric patterns that seem almost live in the sunlight. Inside the courtyard, the sound of your footsteps echoes softly across polished stone. The dome above glows with shades of deep blue. Persian architects have perfected the art of tile work, creating surfaces that shimmer as light moves across them. These buildings are not just places of worship. They are expressions of cultural confidence. Under Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire becomes one of the great powers of the early modern world. Its territory stretches across the Iranian plateau and beyond. Its armies guard trade routes connecting Asia to Europe, and its cities attract merchants from many lands. You walk along the Zayande River, where elegant bridges link different parts of the city. One of them, the Sepol, contains 33 arches stretching gracefully across the flowing water. In the evening, people gather along the bridge to talk, sing, and enjoy the cool air rising from the river. Even centuries later, these bridges will remain among the most beloved landmarks of the city. Trade plays an important role in Safavid prosperity. Caravans arrive carrying silk from the Caspian region, spices from India, and precious goods from Central Asia. European merchants establish trading posts in Safavid cities, hoping to access these valuable markets. Shah Abbas even relocates Armenian merchants to a district of Isfahan called New Julfa, encouraging them to develop international trade networks. This decision helps expand commerce between Persia and Europe, yet historians still debate how strong the Safavid economy truly was compared to rising European powers of the same era. Some researchers believe Persia remained a wealthy and influential state throughout the 17th century. Others argue that European maritime trade routes slowly began bypassing traditional land routes across Persia, weakening its long-term economic position. But during the reign of Shah Abbas, prosperity is clearly visible. You sit in a garden where fountains sparkle under the afternoon sun. Persian gardens are carefully designed suites. Water channels divide the garden into symmetrical sections. Trees provide shade from the intense summer heat. Flowers bloom along narrow pathways where people stroll slowly while discussing poetry or politics. The design reflects ancient Persian ideas about paradise, a peaceful, ordered world where nature and human creativity exist in harmony. Meanwhile, the Safavid court remains a center of artistic achievement. Painters create miniature illustrations filled with rich colors and delicate detail. Carpet weavers produce intricate designs that will later become famous around the world. Metal workers craft elegant swords, bowls, and ceremonial objects decorated with calligraphy and floral patterns. Persian culture flourishes in nearly every field of art. But beyond the beauty of the court and the calm of the gardeners, political challenges continue growing. The Safavid Empire sits between powerful neighbors. To the west lies the Ottoman Empire. To the east, new forces rise in Central Asia, and over time internal struggles begin weakening the Safavid state. Court politics grow complicated. Succession disputes appear among royal heirs. Provincial governors sometimes act with increasing independence. Scholars continue debating which factors played the greatest role in the Safavid Empire's eventual decline. Some emphasize economic pressures. Others point to military weaknesses compared to expanding European powers. But walking through the glowing streets of Isfahan in the evening, none of that seems visible yet. Lanterns reflect softly in the river. Musicians play gentle melodies beneath the arches of the bridges. Families gather in gardens where fountains whisper in the night air. For this moment in history, the Persian world shines with extraordinary beauty and confidence. And travellers who visit Isfahan often repeat the same phrase. Isfahan is half the world. The evening wind drifts quietly through the streets of Isfahan. You walk once again through Naqsh-e-Jahan Square, where lantern light reflects softly across the tiled domes of the surrounding mosques. Merchants close their shops while horses clatter gently across the wide stone plaza. For generations, this city has symbolized the strength of the Safavid Empire, but history rarely stands still. Even as the beauty of Isfahan continues to impress travelers from distant lands, the foundations of Safavid power have begun to weaken. You notice the change first in small ways. Royal authority is no longer as steady as it once was during the reign of Shah Abbas I. After his death in 1629, several rulers follow who struggle to maintain the same level of leadership. Court politics grow more complicated. Rival factions compete for influence inside the palace. Powerful nobles begin gaining greater control over regional affairs. Meanwhile, the empire faces challenges along its borders. To the west, the Ottoman Empire remains a constant rival. For centuries, Safavid Persia and the Ottomans have fought over territory in the Caucasus and Mesopotamia. You travel toward the western frontier, where soldiers patrol fortified towns along the mountains. Both empires maintain strong armies in the region. Battles occur periodically, though treaties sometimes bring temporary peace. These conflicts drain resources. They also highlight differences between the two empires. The Ottomans maintain a highly organized military system, including professional infantry units known as janissaries. The Safavid army, on the other hand, still relies heavily on tribal cavalry, from the Kizilbash clans who helped establish the dynasty. Historians often debate whether this military structure limited the Safavid state's ability to modernize its forces. Some scholars believe Safavid rulers struggled to balance loyalty between tribal military leaders and centralized royal authority. Others argue that the empire remained strong but simply faced growing external pressures. Beyond the western frontier, other challenges begin appearing inside the empire itself. You travel south toward the Persian Gulf, where trade routes once brought enormous wealth into Safavid cities. For centuries, merchants moving between Asia and Europe relied on caravan routes passing through Persia. But the global economy is changing. European powers such as Portugal, the Netherlands, and England now dominate maritime trade routes across the Indian Ocean. Ships carry goods directly between continents without relying on traditional overland paths. Historians still debate how dramatically this shift affected the Safavid economy. Some researchers argue that the loss of certain trade revenues weakened the state's financial stability. Others suggest that Persia remained economically active but faced increasing competition from European merchants controlling sea routes. Regardless of the exact causes, economic pressures slowly accumulate. You walk through markets where merchants complain about rising taxes and declining profits. Caravans still arrive, but the volume of goods appears smaller than before. Meanwhile, unrest begins growing in distant provinces. Some regional governors act more independently from the central court. Tribal groups sometimes challenge royal authority in remote areas. And beyond the eastern mountains, a powerful new force begins rising. You ride toward the lands of Afghanistan, where a tribal leader named Mirwais Khan has begun organizing resistance against Safavid rule. At first, these rebellions appear limited, but they grow stronger over time. Finally, in the early 18th century, Afghan forces march westward toward the heart of the empire. You stand on the plains outside Isfahan as the once magnificent Safavid capital faces a terrifying moment. The Afghan army surrounds the city. Months pass. Food becomes scarce. Citizens grow weak from hunger and uncertainty. The grand palaces and mosques still stand beautifully under the sun, but inside the walls the empire is collapsing. In 1722, the Safavid ruler finally surrenders. Isfahan falls. It is a shocking moment in Persian history. The dynasty that once created one of the most splendid empires of the early modern world has been defeated by a much smaller force. Historians continue debating how such a powerful state could fall so suddenly. Some emphasize internal political weakness. Others point to economic pressures and military stagnation. Most scholars agree that several factors combined to produce the collapse. But even as the Safavid dynasty ends, the story of Persia does not stop. The Iranian plateau has survived countless invasions and transformations across thousands of years, and soon from within the chaos that follows the Safavid collapse, a new leader will rise. A leader whose ambition will once again restore Persian power. His name will be remembered across history, Nader. The morning air feels tense across the plains of northeastern Iran. You ride past scattered villages where people speak quietly about the uncertain future of the land. Only a few years ago, the Safavid Empire ruled this region from the magnificent city of Isfahan. Now that empire has collapsed, Afghan forces occupy parts of the country. Local leaders struggle to maintain order. Trade routes that once carried wealth across Persia feel less secure. The Iranian world has entered another moment of instability, yet history often moves in unexpected ways during times of chaos. From the rugged lands of Khorasan in the northeast, a new figure begins rising. His name is Nader. Later generations will call him Nader Shah. You first encounter him among a group of hardened warriors moving across the dusty hills near Mashhad. Their armor is simple but practical. Their horses are strong and well-trained for long journeys across difficult terrain. Nader himself comes from humble origins. He was born into a Turkoman tribal family and grew up in a region frequently threatened by raids and political conflict. From a young age, he learned how to survive in harsh conditions. He learned how to ride, how to fight, how to lead men across the battlefield. Historians still debate many details of Nader's early life. Some accounts portray him as a bandit leader who later became a military commander. Others suggest he served under local tribal authorities before rising through the ranks of regional armies. But by the early 18th century, one fact becomes clear. Nader possesses extraordinary military talent. You watch as he gathers supporters from different tribes across northeastern Iran. These warriors are not fighting merely for conquest. They believe they are helping restore order to a land that has fallen into chaos. At this time, a surviving member of the Safavid royal family named Tahmasp II attempts to reclaim the throne. Nader offers his support, but in truth it is Nader's army that provides the real strength behind the campaign. You ride with the growing force as it moves westward toward territories held by Afghan rulers. The battles that follow are fierce. Nader's troops fight with discipline and speed. He introduces new military tactics combining traditional cavalry warfare with improved use of firearms and artillery. Gradually, the Afghan armies are pushed back. Cities begin returning to Persian control. Finally, after several major victories, the Afghan occupation collapses. The Safavid heir is restored to the throne, but the balance of power has changed. Nader is now the most powerful military leader in the region. Soon tensions emerge between Nader and the royal court. The restored Safavid ruler proves weak and incisive. Nader grows frustrated. In 1736, during a grand assembly of tribal leaders and nobles on the plains of Mughal, Nader takes a dramatic step. He declares himself Shah, king. The Safavid dynasty officially ends. A new empire begins. You stand among thousands of soldiers gathered beneath banners as Nader Shah receives the crown. The ceremony feels both triumphant and uncertain. Many people hope that strong leadership will restore stability to the Iranian world. But Nader's ambitions extend far beyond rebuilding Persia. He plans to create a new empire that rivals the greatest conquerors of history. His armies march east towards Central Asia, then south toward the wealthy lands of India. You follow the campaign as Nader's forces cross mountains and deserts on their way toward the Mughal Empire. The Mughal rulers once controlled one of the richest states in the world, but by the 18th century their power has begun weakening. In 1739, Nader Shah defeats the Mughal army near the city of Karnal. The road to Delhi lies open. You walk through the gates of Delhi as Nader's army enters the magnificent Mughal capital. Palaces filled with jewels and precious metals stand before you. The wealth of the city is almost unimaginable. Among the treasures taken by Nader's forces are two objects that will become legendary: the peacock throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. The enormous riches carried back to Persia temporarily fill the royal treasury. For a moment, Nader Shah appears unstoppable. His empire stretches across Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Central Asia. Foreign observers begin comparing him to earlier conquerors like Alexander and Timur, but power achieved through constant warfare carries its own dangers. Over time, Nader grows increasingly suspicious of potential rivals. Heavy taxation places pressure on the population. Rebellions begin appearing in distant provinces. Historians still debate whether Nader Shah's later years reflected genuine paranoia or simply the difficult realities of maintaining such a vast empire. In 1747, his rule ends suddenly. Nader Shah is assassinated by members of his own inner circle. Without his leadership, the empire quickly fragments. Yet despite the collapse that follows, Nader's rise proves something important. Even after centuries of invasions, dynasties and foreign rule, the Iranian world still possesses the ability to produce powerful leaders capable of reshaping the political map. As evening settles across the plains of Khorasan, the land once again stands at a crossroads. And the story of Persia continues moving slowly towards the moment when the world will finally begin calling this ancient land by a new name: Iran. The morning sun rises slowly over the city of Tehran. At this moment in your journey, the city is still small compared to the grand capitals you visited earlier. Its streets are narrow. Mud brick walls surround clusters of houses and modest markets. Travellers pass through on their way between northern mountains and the plains stretching south toward the desert. Yet in the centuries ahead, this quiet city will become the political heart of the Iranian world. For now, however, the land is still recovering from the chaos that followed the death of Nader Shah. After his assassination in 1747, the empire rebuilt collapses quickly. Regional leaders declare independence. Tribal confederations compete for control of different provinces. Several short-lived dynasties appear and disappear across the Iranian plateau. For decades, the country remains politically fragmented. You ride through villages where people speak about shifting rulers and uncertain alliances. Trade continues, agriculture continues, but the stability that once held the region together has weakened. Eventually, a new power begins emerging from the north: the Qajar tribe. The Qajars are part of the Turkic tribal groups that have lived in northern Iran for generations. Their leaders gradually expand influence across nearby regions during the late 18th century. At the centre of this rise stands a determined figure named Aga Muhammad Khan. You encounter him in the rugged landscapes near the Caspian Sea, where his forces begin consolidating control over Tianjin and surrounding territories. Aga Muhammad Khan's life story is unusual even by the standards of Persian rulers. As a young boy, he had been captured by rival forces during a period of tribal conflict and was castrated, a common practice intended to remove potential rivals from royal succession. Despite this traumatic beginning, he grows into a ruthless and determined leader. Historians often describe him as both fiercely intelligent and deeply suspicious of those around him. Through a series of campaigns across Iran, Aga Muhammad Khan gradually defeats rival leaders and reunifies much of the country under his authority. In 1786, he selects Tehran as his capital. You walk through the city as royal builders begin expanding its walls and constructing new government buildings. Tehran's location offers several advantages. It sits close to the fertile lands near the Caspian Sea. It also lies near important routes connecting northern and central Iran. Under Qajar rule, the city slowly grows into a political centre. In 1796, Aga Muhammad Khan crowns himself Shah. The Qajar dynasty officially begins, but the stability he brings to the country does not last long. Just 1 year after claiming the throne, he is assassinated inside his own tent by servants who feared punishment for a mistake. The sudden death of the founder creates uncertainty once again. Yet the Qajar dynasty continues under his successors. You walk through Tehran during the reign of Fath Ali Shah, one of the early Qajar rulers. The royal court appears colourful and elaborate. Portraits of the Shah show him wearing long robes, jewelled crowns, and a distinctive long beard that becomes a symbol of royal authority. Court ceremonies emphasize traditional Persian grandeur. Poets praise the king in ornate verses. Musicians perform during lavish gatherings. Yet beneath the decorative surface, the Qajar state faces serious challenges. The world beyond Persia is changing rapidly. Powerful European empires are expanding across Asia. Russia pushes southward from the Caucasus. Britain strengthens its influence in India and the Persian Gulf. For the first time in centuries, Persia faces major political pressure from foreign powers with advanced military technology. You travel north toward the Caucasus, where Russian armies confront Persian forces during a series of wars in the early 19th century. The battles are difficult. Persian soldiers fight bravely, but Russian armies possess modern weapons and more organized military systems. Eventually, Persia is forced to sign treaties surrendering large territories in the Caucasus. These losses shock the Persian leadership. Historians still debate whether the Qajar rulers could have realistically resisted the expanding Russian Empire during this period. Some scholars argue that Persia lacked the resources necessary to modernize its army quickly enough. Others believe internal political political divisions weakened the country's ability to respond effectively. Regardless of the reasons, the treaties mark an important turning point. Persia begins losing control over regions that had once formed part of its historic sphere of influence. At the same time, British diplomats increase their involvement in Persian affairs, seeking to protect trade routes and prevent rival powers from threatening British India. The Iranian plateau has once again become a stage where global politics unfold, but inside the cities and villages of Persia, something else is beginning to grow. A new idea. The idea that the country must reform itself in order to survive in a rapidly changing world. And this idea will eventually reshape Persia more dramatically than any invading army. The afternoon sun warms the narrow streets of Tehran. You walk through the growing capital, where merchants call out from crowded stalls and travellers from distant provinces gather in caravanserais to exchange news. The city is expanding slowly under Qajar rule, but the atmosphere feels different from the grand imperial capitals you saw earlier in your journey. There is a sense that Persia is standing between two worlds. One foot remains firmly planted in ancient traditions, the other is being pulled toward a rapidly changing modern age. You notice the contrast everywhere. In the royal palace court, officials still wear elaborate robes and follow ceremonial customs that echo centuries of Persian monarchy. Poets recite verses praising the Shah while musicians perform in candlelit halls. Yet just outside the palace gates, new ideas are beginning to circulate. European travellers arrive with unfamiliar technologies and political concepts. Printed books begin appearing in markets. Diplomats discuss railways, factories, and modern education. Persia is slowly encountering the industrial world. You visit a small gathering where intellectuals discuss the future of the country. Many of them are concerned about the growing influence of foreign powers. Russia continues expanding southward. Britain strengthens its political presence through trade agreements and diplomatic pressure. Some observers worry that Persia may eventually lose its independence entirely if it does not reform. Historians often describe the 19th century as a period when many traditional societies face similar dilemmas. How could older political systems adapt to a world shaped by industrial technology and powerful modern states? In Persia, this question becomes increasingly urgent. You travel north toward the city of Tabriz, an important centre of political and intellectual activity during the Qajar period. Here you meet reform-minded officials who believe Persia must modernize its military and administration. One of the most significant figures in this movement is a man named Abbas Mirza. He is the crown prince and governor of Azerbaijan during the early 19th century. Abbas Mirza understands that Persia's defeats against Russia revealed serious weaknesses in the country's army. You watch as new military training programs begin in Tabriz. Soldiers practice with European-style weapons. Foreign advisors help train officers in modern battlefield tactics. Students are even sent to Europe to study engineering and science. These reforms represent some of the first attempts to modernize Persia's institutions. Yet the process is slow and often controversial. Many traditional elites worry that adopting foreign ideas could weaken Persian cultural identity. Others argue that reform is necessary for survival in a changing world. Scholars remain divided about how effective these early modernization efforts truly were. Some historians believe the reforms laid important foundations for future changes. Others suggest that resistance from powerful court factions limited their impact. Still, the seeds of transformation have been planted. You walk through a printing workshop where workers carefully arrange metal type for a Persian language newspaper. The printing press is still relatively new in Persia, but its influence grows quickly. Newspapers allow political ideas to spread among educated readers. Discussions about government law and national identity begin appearing in public conversation. At the same time, travel between Persia and Europe increases. Persian diplomats and students visiting cities like Paris and London encounter political systems very different from traditional monarchy. They learn about constitutional government, about parliaments, about the idea that political authority might come from the people rather than solely from a king. When these travellers return home, they bring those ideas with them. You sit in a quiet courtyard where several intellectuals debate these concepts late into the night. Some believe Persia must remain a monarchy but adopt modern administrative reforms. Others begin imagining something far more radical, a constitutional system that limits the power of the Shah. These discussions remain mostly theoretical for many years. But beneath the calm surface of daily life, pressure continues building. Economic problems increase frustration among merchants and craftsmen. Heavy taxation angers many communities. Foreign economic concessions granted by the Qajar court sometimes give European companies control over important industries. These agreements spark resentment among ordinary citizens. Historians often point to these tensions as early signs of a growing national consciousness within Persia. People begin thinking of themselves not only as members of tribes or cities, but as part of a larger country with shared interests. As evening falls across Tehran, you walk through the crowded bazaar where merchants light oil lamps above their shops. The warm glow reflects off copper bowls and woven carpets hanging from wooden beams. Somewhere in the distance, voices continue discussing the future of the nation. The idea of Persia is changing. Soon these conversations will grow louder, and they will lead to one of the most important political transformations in the country's modern history. The winter air feels sharp in the streets of Tehran. You walk through the crowded bazaar where merchants gather in small circles, speaking in low but urgent voices. The sounds of trade still echo through the market, yet beneath the normal rhythm of daily life there is tension in the air. For years, dissatisfaction has been growing across Persia. Merchants complain about unfair taxes. Religious scholars criticize the influence of foreign powers. Students returning from Europe speak openly about political reform. All these voices are slowly merging into something larger, a movement. You step into a tea house where men sit close together around small tables. Cups of hot tea steam gently in the cold air while discussions grow more animated. Many people now believe that Persia must change its system of government. They believe the absolute authority of the Shah should be limited, and that the country needs laws written by representatives of the people. This idea is revolutionary for the time. For centuries, Persian kings ruled with near absolute power. But by the early 20th century, new political concepts have entered the public imagination. Historians often call this moment the Persian Constitutional Revolution. The events begin unfolding around 1905. At first, protests focus on economic grievances. You stand among crowds gathering outside government buildings, where merchants demand fair treatment and an end to corrupt tax policies. Clerics join the protests as well, arguing that justice must be restored within society. Soon the movement expands. People begin demanding the creation of a parliament, a national assembly where representatives from different parts of the country can debate laws and hold the government accountable. The Shah at this time, Muzaffar al-Din Shah, faces enormous pressure. Eventually, in 1906, he agrees to sign a royal decree allowing the formation of a constitution. You watch as crowds gather in celebration. For the first time in Persian history, the country will have a parliament known as the Majlis. Inside the newly formed assembly hall, representatives from various social groups begin drafting a constitution. Merchants, scholars, clerics, landowners, all debate the future structure of the state. The constitution establishes limits on royal power and outlines the rights of citizens under the law. It is an extraordinary moment. Persia is attempting to transform itself from a traditional monarchy into a constitutional state. Yet the path forward proves far from easy. After Muzaffar al-Din Shah dies shortly after signing the constitution, his successor Muhammad Ali Shah strongly opposes the new political system. You stand in the streets of Tehran during one of the most dramatic confrontations of this era. Royal forces surround the parliament building. Cannons are positioned in the square. In 1908, the Shah orders the Majlis to be bombarded. The building is damaged. Many constitutional leaders are arrested or forced into exile. For a moment, it appears the constitutional experiment has failed, but resistance quickly grows across the country. Revolutionary forces gather in several regions, including Tabriz and the Caspian provinces. You travel north where armed groups organize to defend the constitutional movement. These fighters come from different backgrounds: merchants, tribal leaders, urban activists. Their goal is clear: restore the constitution. After months of fighting, constitutional forces eventually march towards Tehran. In 1909, they captured this capital. Muhammad Ali Shah is forced to abdicate. The constitution is restored. Historians still debate how successful the constitutional revolution truly was. Some scholars view it as a turning point that introduced modern political ideas into Iranian society. Others argue that internal divisions and foreign interference limited its long-term effectiveness. Both interpretations contain elements of truth. Although the revolution establishes important political institutions, Persia continues facing enormous challenges. Foreign powers still compete for influence inside the country. Economic difficulties persist. Political factions struggle for control within the new constitutional system. Yet something important has changed. The idea of national participation in government has entered Persian political life. Citizens now speak openly about rights, representation and reform. The old world of absolute monarchy can no longer function in the same way. As night falls over, Tehran lanterns glow in the narrow streets. Inside our homes and tea houses, people continue discussing politics long after the markets close. Persia is entering the modern age, and soon another powerful figure will rise who promises to bring order and strength to a nation still searching for its future. His name will be Reza Khan. The early morning fog hangs lightly over the streets of Tehran. You walk along a wide avenue where soldiers stand at attention near government buildings. The atmosphere in the city feels tense but purposeful, as if something significant is unfolding beneath the quiet routine of daily life. Persia has entered the 20th century, but the country still struggles with instability. The constitutional revolution introduced new political ideas, yet the system remains fragile. Rival factions compete for power. Economic problems persist. Foreign influence from Russia and Britain continues shaping events behind the scenes. Many people believe the country needs strong leadership, and in the early 1920s that leadership appears in an unexpected form. A military officer named Reza Khan. You first encounter him among a group of soldiers stationed near the capital. Tall, disciplined and confident Reza Khan quickly earns a reputation as a capable commander within the Persian Cossack Brigade. The brigade itself has an unusual history. It was originally trained with assistance from Russian military advisors and had become one of the most organized armed forces in the country. Reza Khan rises steadily through its ranks. In 1921, a dramatic political moment occurs. Reza Khan leads a military march into Tehran in what historians often describe as a coup. The move is surprisingly swift. Government resistance collapses quickly and Reza Khan emerges as one of the most powerful figures in the country. At first, he does not immediately declare himself king. Instead, he becomes the Minister of War and later Prime Minister, gradually consolidating authority within the government. You walk through the capital as new reforms begin appearing. Road construction expands across the country. Efforts are made to create a more unified national army. Government institutions attempt to reduce the power of tribal leaders who had long exercised regional autonomy. Historians still debate how these reforms should be interpreted. Some scholars argue that Reza Khan's policies were necessary steps toward building a modern nation-state capable of defending itself in a rapidly changing world. Others suggest that his rule concentrated power too heavily in the hands of a single leader, weakening the constitutional system created earlier. Both perspectives reveal important aspects of this period. What is clear is that Reza Khan moves decisively. In 1925, the Iranian parliament officially ends the Qajar dynasty. Shortly afterward, Reza Khan takes the throne. He becomes Reza Shah Pahlavi, the beginning of a new dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty. You watch the coronation ceremony where royal officials present the crown of Iran to the new ruler. The atmosphere feels both traditional and modern at the same time. Reza Shah envisions transforming the country into a stronger and more centralized state. Many of his reforms focus on modernization. Railways begin connecting distant regions of the country. New schools are established. Government bureaucracy expands to manage national institutions more effectively. Traditional clothing customs are sometimes replaced by Western-style dress in official settings. Urban planning projects reshape cities such as Tehran. Historians continue debating how deeply these reforms affected everyday life across the country. In some cities, modernization moves quickly. In rural areas, traditional ways of life remain largely unchanged. But one decision made by Reza Shah in 1935 carries enormous symbolic importance. You stand in a government hall where diplomats from several countries have gathered. The Shah announces that the country should be known internationally by a new name, Iran. This name is not entirely new. The word Iran has ancient roots connected to the term Aryan. referring to the peoples who once inhabited the Iranian plateau thousands of years earlier. For centuries, Persians themselves had used variations of the word Iran in their own language. However, outside the country, the land had long been known primarily as Persia. Reza Shah's decision encourages foreign governments to adopt the name Iran in official communication. Historians still discuss the motivations behind this change. Some scholars believe the Shah wanted to emphasize the deeper historical identity of the Iranian people rather than the name Persia, which had been popularized by Greek writers centuries earlier. Others suggest the change reflected a broader effort to present the country as a modern nation-state, rather than an exotic ancient kingdom. Regardless of the interpretation, the decision marks an important moment in global perception. The land once known as Persia now appears on international maps as Iran. Yet walking through the streets of Tehran that evening, you notice something interesting. People still speak proudly about their Persian heritage. Poetry from ancient kings is still recited. The memory of Cyrus, Darius, and the great empires of the past remains deeply rooted in cultural identity. The name may have changed, but the long story of Persia continues living inside the modern nation called Iran. The morning sky above Tehran is clear and bright. You stand on a newly paved boulevard where automobiles now move alongside horse-drawn carts. Government buildings rise along the street, their architecture reflecting the modernization projects launched during the reign of Reza Shah. For the first time in centuries, the Iranian state is attempting to build national infrastructure on a large scale. Railways stretch across deserts and mountains. New schools teach subjects such as science, engineering, and modern history. Government officials work to create a centralized bureaucracy capable of managing the entire country. Reza Shah believes that only a strong and modern state can protect Iran's independence in a world dominated by powerful empires. Yet the international situation surrounding Iran grows increasingly complicated. To the north lies the Soviet Union. To the south and west stands the British Empire. Both powers maintain strong interests in the region, especially because of something discovered in Iran during the early 20th century: oil. You travel southwest toward the region of Khuzestan, where the first large oil fields were discovered in 1908. At the time, the discovery seemed almost miraculous. Beneath the dry ground lay vast reserves of petroleum, a resource that would soon become one of the most valuable commodities in the modern industrial world. Foreign companies quickly moved to develop the oil industry. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which would later become British Petroleum, gained major control over the production and export of Iranian oil. Historians continue debating how beneficial these early agreements were for Iran. Some scholars argue that the contracts gave foreign companies far too much control over the country's natural resources. Others suggest that Iran lacked the technology and capital necessary to develop the industry independently at the time. Either way, oil begins tying Iran more deeply into global politics. As the 1930s progressed, tensions widened across the world. Europe moves toward another major war. In 1939, World War II begins. Although Iran initially declares neutrality, its strategic location and oil resources make the country extremely important to the Allied powers. In 1941, British and Soviet forces jointly invade Iran. You stand near a railway station as foreign troops arrive. The decision shocks the Iranian government. The Allies fear that German influence might grow within Iran and threaten supply routes needed for the war effort. To secure these routes, they move quickly to occupy the country. Reza Shah finds himself in an impossible position. Facing overwhelming military pressure, he is forced to abdicate the throne. His son takes his place, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. You watch the young Shah assume power in uncertain circumstances. Foreign troops remain inside the country. The war continues across distant battlefields. Iran becomes a crucial corridor for transporting supplies from Allied factories to Soviet forces fighting against Nazi Germany. Historians often refer to this route as the Persian Corridor. Thousands of trucks, trains, and ships move across Iranian territory carrying weapons, food, and equipment needed for the war. For ordinary Iranians, the presence of foreign armies brings both economic opportunities and social disruption. Cities grow crowded with soldiers and laborers. Prices rise. Political debates intensify about the country's future. When World War II finally ends in 1945, the world enters a new geopolitical era. The Cold War, Two superpowers now dominate global politics. The United States and the Soviet Union. Iran sits directly between their spheres of influence. Almost immediately, tensions appear. Here, Soviet forces initially hesitate to withdraw from northern Iran after the war. Local political movements in the region seek greater autonomy with Soviet support, but international pressure eventually forces the Soviets to leave. The episode becomes one of the earliest confrontations of the Cold War. Inside Iran, political life becomes increasingly vibrant and unpredictable. New political parties form. Newspapers debate the future direction of the country, and one issue dominates public conversation above all others: control of Iran's oil. Many citizens believe that foreign companies have gained too much influence over the country's most valuable natural resource. This concern soon leads to the rise of a charismatic political figure, a man who promises to restore full national control over Iranian oil. His name is Mohammad Mossadegh, and his actions will soon bring Iran to the center of global political drama. The afternoon sun shines brightly over the streets of Tehran. You walk through a lively square where crowds gather around newspaper stands reading the latest headlines with intense interest. Political conversations fill the air. Students debate loudly outside university gates. Merchants in the bazaar pause their work to discuss events unfolding across the country. Iran has entered a new era of political energy. The young Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi still sits on the throne, but real political power now flows through a complex system that includes parliament, political parties, and a growing network of activists and intellectuals. At the center of the national conversation stands one question: who should control Iran's oil? For decades, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company has dominated the country's oil industry. Although the company provides revenue to the Iranian government, many citizens believe the agreements heavily favour British interests. You travel south again toward the oil fields of Khuzestan. Towering drilling rigs rise above the landscape. Workers move between pipelines and storage tanks under the hot desert sun. Oil production has transformed this region into one of the most important energy centres in the world. Yet many Iranian workers feel they receive only a small share of the wealth produced by these fields. This frustration fuels growing political movements calling for national control of the oil industry. One man becomes the leading voice of this movement: Mohammad Mossadegh. You first see him entering parliament, where crowds gather outside the building to cheer his arrival. Mossadegh is an unusual political figure. He is elderly, he speaks with passionate intensity, and he is deeply committed to the idea of Iranian sovereignty. Historians often describe him as both a nationalist and a constitutionalist. He believes Iran should maintain democratic institutions while protecting its independence from foreign domination. In 1951, the Iranian parliament votes to nationalize the country's oil industry. The decision sends shockwaves across the world. For many Iranians, the move represents a moment of national pride. For the British government, it threatens major economic interests. You stand among thousands of people celebrating in the streets of Tehran as news of the nationalization spreads. Flags wave above cheering crowds. Newspapers print bold headlines declaring that Iran has reclaimed control over its own resources. But the international reaction is swift. Britain imposes economic sanctions. British technicians leave Iranian oil facilities. Global oil companies refuse to purchase Iranian petroleum under British pressure. The result is an economic crisis. Oil production drops sharply. Government revenues decline. Inside Iran, political tensions grow as different factions argue about how to respond. At the same time, the Cold War intensifies global anxiety. The United States and Britain worry that political instability in Iran might create opportunities for communist influence, especially given the country's proximity to the Soviet Union. Historians continue debating the extent of this concern. Some scholars believe Western leaders genuinely feared a shift in Iran's political alignment during a tense moment in global geopolitics. Others argue that protecting access to oil played a more important role in shaping foreign policy decisions. In 1953, events reach a dramatic turning point. You walk through the capital during days of growing unrest. Crowds gather in support of Mossadegh. Other groups demonstrate in favor of the Shah. Political uncertainty spreads through the city. Then in August of that year, a covert operation supported by British and American intelligence services helps orchestrate a coup against Mossadegh's government. Military units move through the streets, government buildings change hands. By the end of the confrontation, Mossadegh is removed from power. The Shah, who had briefly fled the country, returns to the throne with strengthened authority. The events of 1953 remain one of the most debated moments in modern Iranian history. Some historians argue the coup ended a promising experiment in democratic government. Others claim the political situation at the time had already become unstable and might have collapsed regardless of foreign involvement. But nearly all scholars agree that the episode deeply shaped Iranian attitudes toward foreign powers. Many citizens felt their country's political future had been influenced by outside intervention. In the years that follow, the Shah begins consolidating power. He launches ambitious modernization programs designed to transform Iran into a strong and prosperous state. Yet beneath the surface of progress, social and political tensions continue building. And those tensions will eventually erupt in one of the most dramatic revolutions of the 20th century. The evening air in Tehran feels electric. You walk through crowded streets where bright neon lights reflect off shop windows and modern buildings rise above older neighborhoods that have stood for generations. Automobiles fill the wide avenues while music drifts from cafes and cinemas. On the surface, Iran appears to be transforming rapidly. During the 1960s and 1970s, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi launches a sweeping modernization program known as the White Revolution. You hear the phrase often as you move through the city. Government posters promote new reforms. Newspapers describe ambitious plans for economic development. The Shah believes Iran can become one of the most modern and powerful nations in the Middle East. The reforms include several major initiatives. Land reform aims to redistribute property from large landlords to rural farmers. Educational programs expand literacy across the country. Women gain the right to vote and increased access to universities. Industrial projects bring new factories, highways, and infrastructure. In many cities, the changes are visible everywhere. You pass newly built universities where students discuss politics and philosophy in crowded courtyards. Hospitals and schools expand across growing urban districts. Oil revenues increase dramatically during this period, providing enormous financial resources for development. Historians still debate the overall success of the White Revolution. Some scholars argue the reforms significantly improved education, healthcare, and economic growth. Others believe the rapid pace of change created social dislocation and widened inequality between urban and rural populations. Both interpretations capture part of the reality. As you walk through Tehran, the contrast between wealth and hardship becomes clear. Modern high-rise buildings stand beside neighborhoods where families struggle with rising living costs. Rural migrants arrive in cities searching for work in expanding industries. Meanwhile, political life remains tightly controlled. After the events of 1953, the Shah gradually consolidates his authority. Political opposition becomes increasingly restricted. A powerful intelligence organization known as Safavid monitors dissent and suppresses critics of the government. For many citizens, this atmosphere creates growing frustration. Economic modernization has arrived, but political freedoms remain limited. You enter a quiet mosque courtyard where a group of students listens carefully to a religious scholar speaking about justice and moral responsibility in society. Among the voices criticizing the Shah's policies, some of the most influential come from religious leaders. One of them is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. You first hear his name in whispered conversations among students and clerics. Khomeini strongly opposes several aspects of the Shah's reforms, especially policies he believes weaken Islamic traditions and increase foreign influence within Iran. In 1963, large protests erupt after Khomeini publicly criticizes the government. The demonstrations spread quickly. Security forces respond with arrests and repression. Soon afterward, Khomeini is exiled from Iran. Yet exile does not silence his message. From abroad, he continues delivering speeches criticizing the Shah's rule. Recordings of his sermons circulate secretly among supporters inside the country. Over the following years, dissatisfaction grows across several segments of Iranian society. Some intellectuals demand greater political freedom. Religious leaders oppose cultural policies they consider too Western-led. Workers and students protest economic inequality. Even some members of the traditional merchant class begin losing confidence in the government. Historians still debate exactly why these different groups eventually united in opposition. Some scholars emphasize economic problems during the late 1970s, including inflation and unemployment. Others focus on political repression and the lack of meaningful participation in government. Whatever the reason, protests begin spreading across Iran in 1978. You stand among thousands of people marching through Tehran streets. Demonstrators carry banners calling for reform. Others demand the Shah's resignation. Each protest leads to more demonstrations. Crowds grow larger. Tension fills the city. By early 1979, the political crisis reaches its climax. The Shah leaves Iran. After decades of rule, the monarchy collapses. Soon afterward, Ayatollah Khomeini returns from exile to a massive reception. Millions and millions of people gather to welcome him home. Within months, a national referendum establishes a new political system, the Islamic Republic of Iran. The revolution marks one of the most dramatic transformations in modern Middle Eastern history. A monarchy that had ruled for centuries has been replaced by a new government combining republican institutions with religious leadership. For many observers around the world, the change is sudden and surprising. Yet as you reflect on the long journey through Persian history, the transformation feels part of a much larger story. A story of constant change, of empires rising and falling, of cultures adapting to new realities, and of a land whose identity stretches back thousands of years. Night settles gently over the city of Tehran. You walk slowly along a quiet street where the noise of the day has faded into a soft hum in the distance. The lights of the modern city glow beneath the dark mountains surrounding the capital. Cars move along wide highways. Shops remain open late into the evening. People gather in parks and cafes, speaking softly beneath the warm glow of street lamps. This is modern Iran, a country shaped by revolutions, ancient traditions, and centuries of transformation. Yet as you stand here, it becomes impossible not to feel the weight of the past surrounding the present, because the story of Iran is far older than the modern state itself. Earlier in your journey, you stood on the ancient plateau where the earliest communities of the Iranian world first appeared thousands of years ago. You watched the rise of Cyrus the Great and the birth of one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. You walked through Persepolis as the Sassanid kings welcomed delegations from distant lands. You saw Alexander's armies sweep across the Persian world. You watched Parthian horsemen challenge Roman legions. You stood beneath the great arch of Ctesiphon during the power of the Persian Empire. You witnessed the arrival of Islam and the quiet survival of Persian language and culture. You walked through the gardens of Isfahan during the Safavid Golden Age. You saw the rise of modern Iran under the Pahlavi dynasty. And finally, you stood among the crowds during the revolution that reshaped the country in 1979. Each era left its mark. Empires disappeared, dynasties ended, but something deeper continued. Persian civilization itself. Historians often emphasize that Iran is not simply a country with an ancient past. It's a civilization whose cultural identity has endured through extraordinary change. Even the name itself reflects that long continuity. For centuries, the outside world called the land Persia, a name derived from the region of Pars where the early Persian tribes once lived. But the people of the land had long used another word, Iran, a word rooted in ancient languages that referred to the land of the Iranian peoples. In 1935, the government encouraged the international community to adopt this older name, yet both names still echo through history. Persia, Iran, two words describing the same ancient story. Scholars continue discussing how the many layers of Iranian history should be understood. Some historians emphasize the continuity of Persian culture across different dynasties and religions. Others focus on the dramatic transformations that reshape society again and again. But perhaps the most fascinating truth lies somewhere between those views. Iran is both ancient and constantly evolving, a civilization that carries memories thousands of years old while continuing to adapt to the challenges of the modern world. You sit quietly on a park bench as the night grows deeper. A gentle breeze moves through the trees. Somewhere nearby, the sound of distant conversation drifts through the air. In the quiet moments of night, it becomes easier to imagine how many generations have stood beneath these same stars. Farmers in ancient villages, soldiers marching for forgotten kings, poets composing verses about gardens and love, scholars studying the movement of stars, travelers crossing deserts along the Silk Road. and millions of ordinary people whose lives quietly shape the long story of this land. The world has changed countless times around them, yet the mountains still stand. The deserts still stretch across the plateau, and the memory of Persia continues living within the country now known as Iran. So as the night grows calm and the city settles into sleep, the story slowly fades into silence. A long journey across thousands of years has come to rest, and somewhere beyond the quiet mountains surrounding Tehran, history continues its endless unfolding. Now the lights grow softer, the streets grow quieter, and the ancient land that once ruled empires drifts gently into the peaceful rhythm of night. The night becomes still. Imagine the vast Iranian plateau beneath a sky filled with stars. Mountains cast dark shapes against the horizon. Somewhere far away, the wind moves slowly across ancient deserts that have watched countless generations pass. Cities rise and fall. Empires appear and disappear, yet the land itself remains patient. You can almost hear the echoes of distant footsteps across time. Caravans moving along forgotten trade routes. Poets whispering verses beneath lantern light. Kings and travellers gazing at the same constellations that still shine above the world tonight. The story of Persia and of Iran never truly ends. It simply continues quietly through each new generation, and as sleep gently approaches, you can leave this long journey behind. The ancient cities fade. The distant battles fall silent. Only the calm night sky remains above the quiet land. Rest now. The long history of Persia has carried you through centuries, and tonight beneath those same timeless stars, the story softly drifts into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.